Hello there, everyone. Welcome to Cryptic Corpse. I am your storyteller, and I'm here to guide you tonight. I know many of you use these videos to drift off to sleep, so before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm always curious, where are you watching from, and what time is it in your part of the world? Now find your cozy spot and relax. My name is Martha Kellerman, but everyone calls me Marty. I'm 38 years old, and 3 months ago I lost everything that mattered to me. First, my husband died in a car accident on a rainy Tuesday morning. Then, a week later, I lost our baby. It was my third miscarriage, and the doctors said there wouldn't be a fourth chance. The house we shared became too quiet, too full of empty rooms and broken dreams. That's when the letter came. My great-aunt Helen had died and left me her sheep ranch in eastern Oregon. I'd never met her, but she remembered me. The lawyer said she had no other family, and the ranch was mine if I wanted it. The alternative was selling everything I owned and starting over somewhere else with nothing. So I packed my car and drove east on Highway 395 through miles of empty desert and rolling hills. The GPS kept acting strange, trying to take me down dirt roads that led nowhere. I had to keep correcting it, following the hand-drawn map the lawyer had given me instead. The ranch sat alone in a valley surrounded by low hills. It looked exactly like what I expected. A small wooden house, a red barn that needed paint, and hundreds of sheep scattered across the brown grass. The October wind was cold and sharp, carrying the smell of sage and something else I couldn't name. I walked around the property that first day, trying to feel like it belonged to me. The sheep watched me with their strange yellow eyes, following my movements but never coming close. There were so many of them, more than I'd expected. They seemed healthy and well-fed, which was odd since Aunt Helen had been dead for 2 weeks. That's when I noticed something strange. From the front porch, the sheep looked random, spread out like animals usually are. But when I climbed up on the barn roof to check for leaks, I could see a pattern. They were arranged in lines and circles, forming shapes that looked almost like letters. From up there, it spelled out a word, before. I climbed down and walked to the back of the house. When I looked again from the kitchen window, the same sheep seemed to spell something different. After. I rubbed my eyes and looked again. The sheep hadn't moved, but somehow the pattern had changed depending on where I stood. It made my stomach feel sick, like when you're in a car going too fast around curves. That night, I found Aunt Helen's journals in the kitchen drawer. Her handwriting was shaky but clear. The last entry was dated 3 days before she died. The sheep know. They always know when it's time. Martha will understand soon enough. The sheep valley chooses its shepherds, not the other way around. I read it 3 times before closing the journal. Outside, the wind picked up, and I could hear the sheep moving around in the darkness. They were making soft sounds, almost like they were talking to each other. I made myself a cup of tea and tried to think about practical things. Feed schedules, veterinary care, winter preparations, normal ranch work. But every time I looked out the window, those yellow eyes seemed to be looking back at me. The property deed was in the kitchen table drawer, along with insurance papers and tax records. Everything looked normal until I saw the date on the deed. It said I'd owned the ranch since 1962. I was born in 1966. I checked the date 3 times, thinking it was a mistake. But there it was, in official legal writing, Martha Kellerman, sole owner, October 15th, 1962. My hands started shaking as I put the papers back in the drawer. Outside, the sheep had gone quiet. The whole valley was silent, except for the wind, and even that seemed to be holding its breath. I went to bed that night, telling myself it was just paperwork errors and tired eyes. Tomorrow, I'd call the lawyer and get everything straightened out. Tomorrow, I'd start learning how to be a sheep rancher. But as I lay in Aunt Helen's bed, listening to the silence outside, I couldn't shake the feeling that the valley had been waiting for me a lot longer than 2 weeks. The sheep knew I was coming. They'd been spelling out my arrival for years. I woke up before sunrise, the way I always did since Tom died. The bed felt too big, too empty, but something else was wrong. The silence outside was different, thicker. I made coffee and looked out the kitchen window. The sheep were gone, all of them. 400 sheep, just gone. I put on my boots and jacket and ran outside. The grass was wet with dew and I could see tracks everywhere. But they all led in the same direction, toward the hills behind the house. I followed the tracks for about a mile. The sheep were there, standing in a perfect circle around something I couldn't see at first. When I got closer, my stomach dropped. It was a grave, an old stone grave marker, so weathered I could barely read the name. Helen Kellerman, 1891-1962. But Aunt Helen had died 3 weeks ago, not in 1962. And this grave looked like it had been here for decades. The sheep watched me read the stone. They didn't make any noise, just stared with those yellow eyes. When I tried to get closer to the grave, they moved together, blocking my way, like they were protecting it, or protecting me from it. I backed away slowly, and the sheep let me go. But they stayed in their circle around the grave, like guards. When I got back to the house, I called the lawyer who'd handled Aunt Helen's will. Mr. Peterson, this is Martha Kellerman. I have some questions about the ranch. Of course. How are you settling in? There's a problem with the paperwork. The deed says I've owned the property since 1962, but that's impossible. I wasn't even born yet. Long pause. Martha, are you feeling all right? You've owned that ranch for 12 years. We've talked about this before. My hands went cold. What do you mean, 12 years? You inherited it from your great-aunt in October 1962. We've handled your tax paperwork every year since then. You called me just last month about the winter feed bills. I hung up without saying goodbye. This was impossible. I had never owned a ranch. I'd lived in Portland my whole adult life. I'd worked at the bank until Tom died. I'd never been to Eastern Oregon before 3 days ago, but when I looked in the kitchen drawer again, there were 12 years' worth of tax returns. All signed by me, in my handwriting. I grabbed the phone and called my sister in California. Jenny, it's Marty. I need to ask you something strange. Hey, how's the ranch? You've been so quiet since you moved out there. What do you mean since I moved out there? Marty, you've lived on that ranch for 12 years. Ever since Tom's accident. Are you okay? You sound confused. I hung up again. My heart was beating so fast I could hear it in my ears. I called my old bank in Portland. The manager told me I'd never worked there. I called my neighbor from my old apartment. She said she'd never heard of me. I called Tom's brother. He said Tom had never been married. Every phone call made things worse. According to everyone I talked to, I had always lived on this ranch. I had never been married. I had never worked at a bank. I had never lived in Portland. But I remembered everything. Tom's laugh, our first date, the apartment we shared, the job I'd had for 8 years. I remembered losing our babies. I remembered the funeral. I remembered packing my things and driving here for the first time just 3 days ago. But somehow I had been here for 12 years. As the sun started to set, I walked back out to check on the sheep. They had returned to the pasture, but now they were arranged differently. From the kitchen window, they spelled out, "Welcome home." That night, I heard voices. They were coming from outside, soft and low. I pressed my ear to the window but couldn't make out words. It sounded like people talking in the distance, but when I looked out there was nobody there, just the sheep standing still in the moonlight. The voices got clearer as the night went on. They were calling my name. "Martha, Martha, come outside, Martha." But the voices weren't coming from people. They were coming from the sheep. I stayed inside with the doors locked until morning. But I could hear them all night long, calling to me in voices that sounded almost human. Voices that sounded like people I used to know. Voices that sounded like Tom. The next morning, I found fresh bread on my kitchen table. I hadn't baked any bread. I didn't even have the ingredients. But there it was, a warm loaf that smelled like my grandmother's kitchen. Next to it was a handwritten recipe in her careful script. But my grandmother had never learned to read or write. I ate the bread anyway. It tasted like home, like safety, like everything I'd lost. While I ate, I stared at the recipe, trying to make sense of the impossible handwriting. That's when I heard the truck. Through the window, I saw an old pickup driving up the dirt road. The sheriff's department logo was faded on the side. A man in uniform got out and walked to my door. "Mrs. Kellerman, I'm Deputy Miller, just checking, to see how you're settling in." He was young, maybe 30, with kind eyes and a friendly smile, but something felt wrong about him. His uniform was too old-fashioned, and his truck looked like it was from the 1960s. "I'm fine," I said through the screen door, "just getting used to things." "That's good to hear. We like to keep an eye on folks out here. It can get lonely." He looked past me into the house. "Mind if I come in for some coffee?" I hesitated. Something in his eyes changed when I didn't answer right away. They got darker, more intense. "Actually, I was just heading out to check on the sheep," I said. "Of course. The sheep are important out here. They tell us things, don't they?" The way he said it made my skin crawl. "What kind of things?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes anymore. "They tell us who belongs and who doesn't." I closed the main door and locked it. Through the window, I watched him walk back to his truck. But instead of driving away, he just sat there watching the house. I called the sheriff's office. "I'm sorry, Ma'am, but we don't have a Deputy Miller," the woman on the phone said. "And we haven't sent anyone out to your area in months." When I looked out the window again, the truck was gone. That afternoon, I tried to leave the ranch. I needed groceries, and I needed to get away from the strangeness for a while. But my car wouldn't start. The engine turned over fine, but it wouldn't catch. I tried for an hour before giving up. When I popped the hood, everything looked normal. But when I tried the key again, the radio came on by itself. A man's voice came through the static. "Martha, Martha, can you hear me?" It was Tom's voice. I turned off the radio, but the voice kept talking. "I've been waiting for you, Martha. I've been waiting so long." "You're dead," I whispered. "I buried you." "I'm not dead. I'm here. I'm with the others now." "What others?" "The ones who chose to stay. The ones who didn't want to be alone anymore." I ran back to the house and slammed the door, but I could still hear his voice coming from outside now, coming from the sheep. "We can be together again, Martha. You just have to choose." That evening I found a photo album I'd never seen before. It was full of pictures of me on the ranch, me feeding sheep, me fixing fences, me standing in the kitchen making bread. In every photo I looked happy, but I had never taken these pictures. I had never done these things. In the last photo I wasn't alone. Tom was there, standing next to me by the barn. But Tom looked different. His eyes were yellow like the sheep's eyes, and when I looked closer, I could see that his shadow on the ground wasn't human-shaped. I threw the album across the room and ran outside. The sheep were waiting for me, all 400 of them, standing in perfect rows in front of the house. In the moonlight, their eyes glowed like tiny suns, and they were all staring at me. One of them stepped forward. It was bigger than the others, with silver fur and scars across its face. When it opened its mouth, Tom's voice came out. "You're lonely, Martha. You've been lonely for so long." "What are you?" I asked. "We're family. We're everyone who ever chose to stay instead of being alone." Another sheep stepped forward. This one spoke in a woman's voice I didn't recognize. "It doesn't hurt, Martha. The changing doesn't hurt. We take care of each other here," said another in the voice of an old man. "No one has to be alone." The big sheep with Tom's voice came closer. "You've felt it, haven't you? The pull, the wanting to run on 4 legs instead of 2, the hunger for something you can't name. I had felt it. Late at night, I'd catch myself walking on my hands and knees. I'd been craving raw meat. I'd been talking to the sheep like they could understand me. And they could understand me. Your husband is gone, Martha, Tom's voice said from the sheep's mouth. But I'm still here. We can be together, but only if you choose to stay. What happened to the real Tom? I am the real Tom. I'm just more now. We all are. I looked at the hundreds of glowing eyes surrounding me. How many of you are there? Enough, they said in unison. Soon there will be more. The sheep began moving closer, forming a circle around me. Their voices mixed together, creating a sound like wind through leaves. Choose, Martha. Choose to stay. Choose to belong. I closed my eyes and felt something changing inside me, something wild and hungry and tired of being alone. When I opened my eyes again, the world looked different, sharper. I could smell things I'd never smelled before. I could hear heartbeats from miles away, and I was no longer standing on two legs. I woke up in the pasture at dawn. My clothes were torn and dirty. My hands were caked with mud, and there was something under my fingernails that looked like blood. But I felt more rested than I had in months. The sheep were grazing around me like nothing had happened. When I sat up, a few of them looked my way and made soft, bleating sounds. It almost sounded like, "Good morning." I stumbled back to the house and looked in the bathroom mirror. My reflection looked normal, except for my eyes. They were lighter than before, with tiny flecks of yellow, and my hair had grown 3 inches overnight. I made coffee with shaking hands and tried to remember what had happened. I remembered the sheep talking. I remembered Tom's voice. I remembered feeling like I belonged somewhere for the first time since he died. But mostly, I remembered not, feeling alone. The phone rang while I was drinking my coffee. It was a woman's voice, scared and tired. "Is this the Kellerman Ranch? I got your number from the newspaper ad." "What ad?" "The one about room and board for widows. It said you had space for someone who needed a fresh start." I hadn't placed any ad, but I heard myself saying, "Yes, that's right. When would you like to come? Today, if that's okay. I can't stay in the city anymore. Everything reminds me of my husband." Her name was Sarah. She was 35 and had lost her husband in a work accident 2 months ago. She arrived that afternoon in a small car packed with everything she owned. She was thin and pale, with dark circles under her eyes. She looked exactly like I had when I first arrived. "It's so quiet here," she said, looking out at the pasture. "Are those your sheep?" "Yes, they're very gentle. They'll keep you company." That night, I cooked dinner for both of us. It felt good to have someone to talk to, someone who understood what it was like to lose everything. We sat on the porch afterward, watching the sheep in the evening light. "They're arranged in patterns," Sarah said. "Are they? Look. From here, they spell out, 'Welcome.'" I looked where she was pointing. She was right. The sheep had arranged themselves to spell out the word, but only visible from where we were sitting. "They're smart animals," I said. "My grandmother always said animals know things we don't." That night, I heard Sarah crying in the guest room. I wanted to comfort her, but something held me back. Instead, I found myself walking outside to the pasture. The sheep were waiting for me. "She's perfect," Tom's voice said from the big silver. "Sheep, she's ready." "Ready for what?" "To choose, just like you did." "I don't remember choosing anything." "But you did. You chose not to be alone, and now you help others make the same choice." I looked back at the house where Sarah was probably crying herself to sleep. She's been through enough. Has she? Or has she just started the best part of her life? Over the next few days, I watched Sarah carefully. She was getting better. The color was coming back to her face. She smiled sometimes when she fed the sheep. She said the quiet was helping her heal. But at night, I heard her talking to the sheep. And sometimes they talked back. On her 4th night, she came to my room. Martha, I had the strangest dream. I was running through the hills on 4 legs, and it felt so natural, so free. Dreams can be strange when you're grieving. But it didn't feel like a dream. It felt like remembering. The next morning, Sarah's hair was longer, and her eyes had flecks of yellow. I found her in the pasture, sitting in the middle of the sheep herd. They had formed a circle around her, just like they had around me. I understand now, she said, without looking at me. They're not just sheep, are they? No, I said, they're not, and neither are we, not anymore. That evening, Sarah and I made dinner together, but we didn't eat it. Instead, we walked out to the pasture and joined the others. A month later, another car came up the dirt road. A woman about 40, recently widowed, looking for a place to start over. She'd seen our ad in the paper. I welcomed her with a warm smile and showed her to the guest room. That night, I cooked dinner for her and listened to her story. She cried a little, talking about her husband and how empty her house felt without him. "It's so peaceful here," she said, looking out at the sheep. "I feel like I could actually sleep tonight." "The quiet helps," I agreed, "and you're not alone here." I watched her walk to her room, and then I went outside to join the others in the pasture. The sheep welcomed me with soft sounds that might have been words. Tom's voice came from the silver sheep. "How many more, Martha?" "As many as it takes," I said. "No one should have to be alone." The sheep moved around me in patterns that spelled out words of welcome and comfort. In the distance, I could hear more cars on Highway 395, carrying more lonely people looking for somewhere to belong. We would be waiting for them. We would help them choose. And when they chose, they would never be alone again. The valley has been waiting for a long time. It knows what people need. It knows how to help them find peace. If you ever drive Highway 395 through eastern Oregon and see sheep arranged in patterns, don't try to read what they're spelling. Just know that somewhere, people who were once alone have found their family. And if you're lonely, if you're driving through and your GPS tries to take you down a dirt road toward a small ranch in a valley, maybe you should listen to it. Maybe. You should come see us. We're always looking for new family members, and we promise you'll never be alone again. My name is James Hawthorne, but everyone calls me Jim. I'm 52 years old, and I've been running from the same nightmare for 4 years now. It started in Korea. 23 good men died under my command. 23 boys who trusted me to bring them home. I can still see their faces when I close my eyes. I can still hear their voices calling for help. The army gave me a medal and sent me home, but they couldn't send home the guilt that followed me like a shadow. I tried everything after the war. Different jobs, different cities, different women. Nothing worked. The noise of the city made me jumpy. Car horns sounded like incoming artillery. Crowds felt like enemy territory. I needed space. I needed quiet. I needed to find some kind of peace. That's how I ended up buying a ranch in the middle of nowhere, New Mexico. October 1957, used my insurance money from the war injury. Took a piece of shrapnel in my leg that still aches when it rains. The ranch was cheap because nobody wanted it. Too far from town, too isolated, too empty, perfect for me. The realtor, a nervous little man with sweaty palms, seemed eager to get rid of the place. He kept checking his watch and glancing at the sky like he was afraid of something. When I signed the papers, he practically threw them at me. "You sure about this, Mr. Hawthorne?" he asked. "It's mighty lonely out there. Last owner, well, he left real sudden-like." I didn't care. Lonely. Sounded good to me. The ranch sat in a valley between 2 red rock canyons, about 30 miles from the nearest neighbor. The house was small but solid. 1 bedroom, a kitchen, a living room with a stone fireplace. Behind it stood a barn that had seen better days and a well that still pumped clean water. But it was the silence that sold me. City silence isn't. really silent. There's always something, cars, voices, radios playing somewhere. This was different. This was the kind of silence that had weight to it. The kind that pressed against your ears like invisible hands. The desert stretched out in every direction, painted in colors I'd never seen before. Red rocks that looked like they were bleeding. Purple shadows that moved even when there was no wind. Yellow grass that whispered secrets to itself. I moved, in with just the basics. A bed, some clothes, my army footlocker and my radio. The first thing I did was establish a routine, just like back in the service. Up at 600 hours, coffee and inspection of the property, maintenance work until 1200, lunch, more work until 1800, dinner, radio time, lights out at 2200. Structure kept the memories at bay. On my third day, I was fixing a section of fence when my shovel hit something hard. I dug down and found a wooden crate buried about 2 feet deep. Inside were items that made my blood run cold. Chinese military equipment. Canteens with markings I recognized from Korea. A helmet with a bullet hole through it. Ammunition that looked fresh despite being buried for years. But here's the thing that really bothered me. Some of the equipment looked too new, too advanced. Like it came from a war that hadn't happened yet. I reburied the crate and tried not to think about it. The silence out there wasn't like any silence I'd ever experienced. In Korea, even during the quiet moments, you could sense danger. Your body stayed ready. But this silence was different. It had discipline, it followed orders. Sometimes I'd catch myself standing at attention without realizing it, like the quiet was calling me to formation. Other times, I'd find myself speaking, in military time and using rank structure when talking to myself. Hawthorne, you need to check the perimeter at 0800 hours, I'd say out loud to the empty desert. The desert always seemed to be listening. By the end of my first week, I'd fallen into a rhythm. The work kept my hands busy, and the silence kept my mind from wandering too far into dark places. For the first time since Korea, I wasn't jumping at every sound, mainly because there weren't any sounds to jump at. That should have been my first warning. But I was so grateful for the peace that I ignored what my gut was trying to tell me. In the army, we learned to trust our instincts. If something felt wrong, it usually was. The problem was, this wrongness felt familiar. It felt like home. And that scared me more than anything else could have. The ranch was supposed to be my escape from the war. Instead, it felt like I'd found a place where the war had been waiting for me all along. But I stayed. God help me, I stayed. The strange things started small. After 2 weeks at the ranch, I began to notice changes in myself. Back in Korea, I could always tell when bad weather was coming. My left knee would ache hours before a storm hit. The other guys used to joke that I was better than the weather reports. Now in the desert, that feeling came back stronger than ever. But it wasn't just storms I could sense. I'd wake up knowing exactly what the day would bring. Wind from the east, temperature dropping by evening, maybe a dust devil around noon. I was right every single time. My body felt different too, stronger, more alert, like it was remembering how to be a soldier again. The first time I heard the artillery, I thought I was losing my mind. It was a Tuesday morning, clear skies, not a cloud anywhere. I was checking the water pump behind the house when I heard it, the distant thump of mortars, followed by the whistle of incoming shells. My body hit the ground before my brain caught up. Old habits. I lay there in the dirt for 10 minutes, waiting for the explosions. They never came. When I finally stood up and looked around, everything was normal. No smoke, no craters, no nothing. Just me and the endless desert and that heavy silence pressing down like a blanket. But I knew what I'd heard. You don't forget. The sound of artillery. Not ever. The radio made things worse. I kept it on most evenings, trying to catch news or music from the outside world. The reception was terrible. Mostly static and fragments of distant stations, but sometimes, late at night, I'd pick up voices that made my skin crawl. They sounded like my old platoon. Sergeant Hawthorne, do you copy? The voice was crackling through static, but I recognized it. Tommy Martinez from San Antonio. Kid who always shared his cigarettes. Kid who died when a Chinese grenade rolled into our foxhole. Tommy, I whispered into the radio. We're still here, Sarge. Still waiting for extraction. When are you coming? Back for us. I turned the radio off so fast I nearly broke the dial, but the next night I turned it back on. And the night after that, because part of me, the part that still carried 23 names like stones in my chest, needed to hear their voices, even if it meant I was going crazy. They always asked the same thing. When was I coming back? When would the rescue come? I started answering them. Soon, I'd say into the static. I'm working on it. The food situation got weird around the same time. I'd driven into town for supplies, stocked up on normal things, beans, bread, coffee, canned soup. Good civilian food, but when I got home and opened a can of soup, it tasted wrong. Too bland, too soft, like food for people who'd forgotten what real hunger felt like. That's when I remembered the sea rations in my army footlocker. I'd kept a few cans as souvenirs, even though they were years old. When I opened one, ham and lima beans, the kind we all hated, it tasted perfect, like it was fresh from the supply depot. Like I was back in my tent in Korea, sharing a meal with my boys before another patrol. I ate nothing but sea rations. For a week. They never made me sick, even though some were from 1953. If anything, they made me feel stronger, more focused, more like the soldier I used to be. The desert started talking to me around then, not with words exactly, more like feelings that came from outside my head. Warnings about storms that never showed up on the radio weather. Knowledge about which paths through the canyons were safe and which ones led to places I shouldn't go. Sometimes I'd be walking the property line and suddenly know there were people watching me from the rocks. When I'd turn to look, I'd see nothing but shadows and red stone. But the feeling stayed with me. Eyes tracking my movements, voices whispering just below the edge of hearing. The worst part was how normal it all felt. Back in the city, if I'd heard dead men's voices on the radio, I would have checked myself. Into a hospital. If food from 1953 had tasted fresh, I would have thrown it away. If I'd felt invisible eyes watching me, I would have called the police. But out here, in this vast emptiness where silence had weight and shadows moved without wind, everything seemed possible. Everything seemed right. I was adapting. That's what soldiers do. We adapt to survive. The problem was, I wasn't sure what I was adapting to. One evening, while the sun was setting behind the Western Canyon, I tried an experiment. I set up my old field radio, the military one I'd kept from Korea, and tuned it to the emergency frequency we'd used for calling in support. This is Sergeant Hawthorne requesting immediate extraction, I said into the microphone. Coordinates unknown. Unit status unclear. The response came back immediately. Copy, Sergeant. Extraction team en route. Maintain position and await. Further orders. The voice was crisp, professional, official, real. I waited all night by that radio, listening to coordinates and call signs and status reports that sounded like they were coming from an active war zone. But when morning came, no helicopter appeared on the horizon. No rescue team materialized from the desert. Just me and the silence and the growing certainty that I wasn't alone out here. Something was waiting in Echo Canyon. Something that knew my name, knew my guilt, knew exactly what I needed to hear. And God help me, I was starting to look forward to hearing it. I saw him on a Thursday morning in early November. I was fixing the fence near the Eastern Canyon when I felt that familiar prickle on the back of my neck. Someone was watching me. I turned around slowly, keeping my hands steady like I'd learned in combat. There he was, standing about 50 feet away near a cluster of red rocks. A Chinese soldier in full uniform, rifle slung across his shoulder, but something was wrong with him. His face kept shifting, like it couldn't decide what it wanted to look like. And when he opened his mouth to speak, the voice that came out was pure American. "You left us behind, Sergeant." It was Danny Walsh's voice, kid from Ohio who always talked about his girl back home, kid who took a sniper's bullet to the chest while I was calling in air support. "Danny?" I whispered. The soldier nodded, but his face was still Chinese, still shifting. "We're all here, Sarge, all 23 of us. We've been waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For you to come back, for you to finish the job." Then he was gone. Just empty desert and the sound of wind through the rocks. I stood there for a long time, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. In the army, they taught us about hallucinations under stress, sleep deprivation, isolation, trauma. They could all make your mind play tricks. But this felt different. This felt real. That night, I started having the dreams, not the usual nightmares about Korea. These were different. In these dreams, I was still fighting, still in command, but the war never ended. It just kept going and going, battle after battle, year after year. In the dreams, my boys were alive, all 23 of them. We fought together as a unit, moving through landscapes that shifted between Korean mountains and New Mexico desert. Sometimes we were fighting Chinese soldiers, sometimes we were fighting Russians. Sometimes we fought people I didn't recognize, carrying weapons I'd never seen. But we were together. We were whole. I started waking up disappointed. The wounds began appearing the next week. Small at first, scratches on my arms that I couldn't remember getting. A bruise on my ribs shaped like a rifle butt. A cut on my forehead that looked suspiciously like shrapnel damage. But here's the thing. They didn't hurt. If anything, they felt good, like my body was remembering what it was supposed to be, like I was becoming the soldier I was meant to be. I stopped shaving, stopped worrying about keeping regular hours, started wearing my old fatigues instead of civilian clothes. They fit better than they had in years. The landscape around the ranch started changing too, not all at once, but gradually, like a photograph slowly developing. The red rocks began to look more like the mountains outside Seoul. The desert scrub turned the color of Korean grass in winter. Even the air smelled different, less like sage and dust, more like gunpowder and fear. Some days, I'd walk out to check the fence and find myself in a completely different place. Rocky hills with snow on the peaks, frozen streams that cut through valleys I'd never seen before. But when I blinked, I'd be back in New Mexico, standing in the same spot I'd started from. The radio chatter got more frequent too. Every night now, I'd tune in and hear my platoon calling for orders. They wanted to know about patrol routes, supply drops, enemy positions. I found myself answering automatically, using the tactical knowledge I'd learned 20 years ago. "Martinez, take your squad up the left flank. Chen, you're on point. Williams, set up the machine gun on that ridge." It felt natural. It felt right. Sometimes other voices would break in, commanding officers I'd never served under, giving me orders I didn't understand, mission objectives that made no sense. But I followed them anyway, because that's what soldiers do. "Sergeant Hawthorne, this is Colonel Morrison. You're being reassigned to Echo Company, indefinite duration." "Copy that, sir. What's the mission?" "Peacekeeping operations. You'll understand when you get there." But I was already there. I'd been there all along. One morning, I woke up and couldn't remember my civilian name. James felt wrong in my mouth, like a word in a foreign language. Jim sounded like something a child would be called. I was Sergeant Hawthorne. That's who I'd always been. The desert didn't feel empty anymore. I could sense my platoon out there taking positions around the ranch, setting up fields of fire, establishing a perimeter, doing their jobs like the good soldiers they'd always been. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. My face was leaner, harder. My eyes had that 1,000-yard stare I remembered from Korea. My body moved with the efficient economy of a man who'd spent years in combat. I was becoming who I was supposed to be. The question was no longer whether I was losing my mind. The question was whether my mind had been lost all along, and I was finally finding it. Because for the first time since coming home from Korea, I felt like I had a purpose. I felt like I belonged somewhere. Even if that somewhere wasn't quite part of the world I'd left behind, the war was calling me back. And this time, I was ready to answer. The truth came to me on a cold December morning, clear as a bell. I was standing on the ridge behind my house, looking out over the desert, when I finally understood what this place really was. The voices on the radio had been trying to tell me for weeks, but I hadn't been ready to listen. "Sergeant Hawthorne," came the familiar voice through my field radio. "Do you understand your mission now?" "Negative, sir. Please clarify." "You're not the first, son. Won't be the last either. This whole thing, Korea, Vietnam, all the wars that came after, they're not separate. They're one long battle, and we need soldiers who understand that." I sat down on a rock, trying to make sense of it. "What do you mean, sir?" "Every veteran who comes out here looking for peace, they find something else instead. They find purpose, real purpose. We're fighting a war that most people can't see, a war that keeps the big one from happening. The big one, nuclear war, son, the war that ends everything. As long as we keep fighting the smaller battles, the regular battles, that one never comes. But it takes special soldiers to do it, soldiers who already know what sacrifice means." That's when I understood. The ranch, the isolation, the echoes of artillery fire. It was all a recruitment center, a place where broken soldiers could become whole again by joining something bigger than themselves. What happened to the other veterans who came here? They found their units. They found their purpose, same as you're about to do. Over the next few days, I started seeing them. Not just my old platoon, but other soldiers too. Men from different wars, different decades. A guy who looked like he'd served in World War II. Another who had the long hair and tired eyes of a Vietnam vet. They all wore the same expression, focused, determined, at peace. They were all waiting for orders. The first test came on a Tuesday. I was checking the fence line when I saw a park ranger's truck coming up the dirt road. A young man got out, clipboard in hand, official patches on his uniform. He looked friendly enough, but something about him set my teeth on edge. "Afternoon, sir. I'm Ranger Peterson. We've had some reports of unusual activity in this area. Mind if I ask you a few questions?" The radio crackled in my pocket. "Sergeant Hawthorne, this is command. Subject is not authorized to be in your area of operations. Recommend immediate action." I looked at the ranger again. He was young, maybe 25, clean-cut. The kind of kid who followed rules and believed in the system. The kind of kid who might ask too many questions about things he didn't understand. "What kind of unusual activity?" I asked. "Lights in the sky at night. Radio transmissions on military frequencies. Some hikers reported hearing artillery fire where there shouldn't be any." The radio buzzed again. "Sergeant, this constitutes a security breach. Deal with it accordingly." My hand moved to the knife on my belt without me thinking about it. Old habits. The ranger was still talking, but I wasn't really listening anymore. I was calculating distances, angles, the best way to handle the situation quietly. "I'm sorry," I said. He looked confused. "Sorry for what, sir?" "For what I have to do." It was quick, professional. The way we'd been trained to handle enemy scouts who got too close to our position. He never saw it coming. I buried him out in the desert where the sand was soft. Said a prayer over the grave because he seemed like a decent kid. But orders were orders. The radio confirmed I'd done the right thing. "Good work, Sergeant. Target eliminated. Maintain security protocols." A week later, it was a family of hikers. They'd gotten lost and ended up at my ranch looking for help. A husband, wife, and 2 young kids. The kids were crying, scared by the desert and the growing darkness. "Please, sir," the man said. "We just need to use your phone. Call for help. Our car broke down about 5 miles back." I looked at them, dirty, tired, desperate. The woman was holding the younger child, a little girl who couldn't have been more than 6. The boy was maybe 10, trying to be brave for his family. The radio spoke quietly in my ear. "Sergeant, unidentified civilians in restricted area, potential intelligence risk. You know the protocol." I did know the protocol, but these were children. "There's no phone here," I said, "but I can drive you back to town in the morning. It's not safe to travel at night." I gave them food and water, let them sleep in the barn, told myself I was just being human. But in the morning, when they asked about the sounds they'd heard during the night, the artillery, the radio chatter, the voices of dead soldiers, I knew they couldn't leave. "I'm sorry," I said again. This time it was harder. This time I had to close my eyes, but soldiers do what they have to do. That's what makes us soldiers. More veterans started showing up after that, one every few weeks, sometimes 2 at a time. Always the same story, looking for peace, running from nightmares, trying to find a place where the war couldn't follow them. I welcomed them all, fed them, listened to their stories, and when they were ready, when the desert had worked its magic on them, the way it had on me, I explained their new mission. Most of them understood right away. They'd been looking for purpose, for something bigger than their pain. Here was both. Some needed more convincing, but the radio helped with that. Once they heard the voices of their old units, their lost brothers, calling for them to come back to the fight, resistance usually crumbled pretty quickly. We became a unit, a real unit, not just echoes and memories, but actual soldiers with an actual mission. The war never ends. It just changes locations, changes enemies, changes tactics. But the need for soldiers, real soldiers who understand sacrifice, that never changes. And if you're reading this, if you're a veteran who's been feeling lost, who's been hearing voices in the quiet places, who's been drawn to isolated spots where the silence has weight, well, maybe you've found what you've been looking for. The coordinates are 35.6870D north, 106.22872D west, New Mexico. Ask anyone in the area about Echo Canyon Ranch. They'll point you in the right direction. We're always recruiting, always looking for good soldiers who understand what duty really means. The war is waiting for you, and this time you won't have to fight alone. My name is Bobby Thorne, and I used to jump out of planes to fight fires. That was before I messed up, before 3 good men died because I made the wrong call. The Forest Service gave me one last chance, a summer job watching for fires from Tower 47 up on Crow's Nest Mountain, 6,847 feet above sea level, high enough that the air feels thin in your lungs, high enough that sounds don't carry right. I climbed up there on a Tuesday in May. The metal tower stretched up like a skeleton finger, pointing at the sky. Each step on the ladder made a hollow ring that echoed off the mountains. By the time I reached the top, my legs were shaking. Not from the climb, from what happened in Idaho 3 months ago. The fire lookout cabin was small. One room with windows on all 4 sides, a desk, a chair, a radio, and a bed. That was it, my new home for the next 4 months. I set my gear down and looked out at the view. Miles and miles of green forest, stretching in every direction. It should have been beautiful. Instead, it made my chest tight. All those trees, all that fire waiting to happen. The radio crackled to life. "Tower 47, this is base. You copy?" I picked up the microphone. "This is Tower 47. Bobby Thorne reporting for duty. Welcome to your new home, Bobby. Weather report every hour on the hour. Fire watch from sunrise to sunset. You got enough food up there for a week?" I looked at the boxes of canned food I'd hauled up. "Yeah, I'm good. Radio check every morning at 7. If we don't hear from you, we'll send someone up." The radio went quiet. Just me and the wind now. I spent the first day getting used to the routine. Check the weather, watch for smoke, Write everything down in the logbook. Simple stuff. The kind of work that keeps your hands busy but leaves your mind free to wander. That was the problem. My mind kept going back to Idaho, to the sound Tommy made when he hit the ground, to the way Jake's parachute never opened, to how Mike burned up in the trees because I told them to jump in the wrong spot. The sun went down red behind the mountains. I heated up a can of beans and ate dinner watching the forest turn dark. From up here, it looked peaceful, like nothing bad could ever happen down there. I was wrong about that. The first weird thing happened that night. I woke up around midnight to the sound of my own voice coming from the radio, but I was in bed. The radio was talking, saying words I'd never said. Tower 47 to base. Smoke visible in Sector 7. Sending coordinates now. But there was no smoke, and I wasn't at the radio. I got up and turned the radio off. The voice stopped. I checked the logbook. Nothing written there about any smoke report. I told myself I was dreaming. Stress can make your mind play tricks. I'd seen it happen to other guys after bad jumps. But when I woke up the next morning, there was a new entry in the logbook, written in my handwriting, dated for June 15th. It was only May 23rd, and the entry described smoke signals from a valley that I couldn't see from any of the windows, a valley that wasn't on any of my maps. The next few days, I tried to ignore what happened with the radio and the logbook. I had a job to do, watch for fires, report the weather, keep my head down, and maybe the Forest Service would let me back on the jump team. But the wrongness kept growing. On Thursday, I was doing my morning weather check when I saw smoke coming up from the trees. Thin grey smoke rising straight up in the still air. I grabbed my binoculars and looked closer. The smoke was coming from a clearing I'd never seen before. A perfect circle of bare ground with something dark in the center. I checked my map. There was no clearing marked there, just solid forest. I called it into base. Tower 47 to base. I've got smoke in Sector 4. Copy that, Tower 47. Can you see flames? I looked again through the binoculars. The clearing was gone, just trees. Thick green trees like nothing had ever been there. Base, false alarm, no smoke visible now. Roger that, keep watching. I hung up the radio and stared at the forest. My hands were shaking. The clearing had been there. I know it had been there. That afternoon, I decided to hike down and check the area myself. Maybe there was a clearing, and I just couldn't see it right from the tower. Maybe someone had been camping illegally and put out their fire. The hike took me 2 hours through thick trees and rocky ground. When I got to where the clearing should have been, there was nothing. Just forest, old forest, with trees that looked like they'd been growing there for 50 years. But the ground felt wrong under my feet, soft, like it wanted to give way. On the hike back up to the tower, I found something that made my blood go cold. Carved into a big pine tree were the words, "Bobby was here, June 20th. In my handwriting. It was still May. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard voices outside. Quiet voices, like people talking far away. But when I looked out the windows, there was nothing but darkness and trees. Around midnight, my radio started making noise. Not voices this time, just static. But there was something in the static, a pattern, like it was trying to tell me something. I turned the volume up and listened closer. The static formed words, not English words, something else, something that hurt my head to hear. I reached for the radio to turn it off, but my hand stopped. The words were becoming clearer, not words I knew, but words I understood. They were telling me I wasn't alone up here, that I'd never been alone. That's when I saw him outside the south window, a man in a Forest Service uniform standing at the edge of the platform, just standing there looking at me through the glass. His face was pale and his eyes were too dark. I knew that face. It was Jake. Jake who died in Idaho. Jake whose parachute never opened. "Bobby," he said. and I could hear him through the glass like it wasn't there. "We've been waiting for you." I blinked, and he was gone. I spent the rest of the night with all the lights on, sitting in the chair with my back to the wall. When the sun came up, I was still sitting there. I called base as soon as my watch said 7 a.m. Tower 47 to base. "Morning, Bobby. How's the weather up there?" I wanted to tell them about Jake, about the clearing that wasn't there, about the carving with my name and a date that hadn't happened yet. But they'd think I was crazy. They'd pull me off the mountain. "Weather's clear," I said. "No wind, good visibility." "Sounds good, we'll check in tomorrow." But I was starting to wonder if tomorrow would come, or if it already had, and I just couldn't remember it. The next morning I woke up and something was very wrong with time. My watch said it was 7 a.m., but the sun was already high in the sky, like it was noon. I checked the radio clock. It said 7 a.m. too, but outside the shadows were all wrong for morning. I called base for my regular check-in. "Tower 47 to base." "Bobby, you're late. It's almost 8. I looked at my watch again. Still 7 a.m. My watch says 7. "Well, fix your watch. Weather report?" I gave them the weather, but I kept staring at my watch. The hands weren't moving. Not at all. After the radio call, I went outside onto the platform. The metal felt hot under my feet, even though the morning air was cold. I looked down at the forest below. Some of the trees were different colors, not fall colors, wrong colors, purple leaves, silver bark, trees that looked like they were made of glass. I rubbed my eyes and looked again. Normal trees, green and brown like they should be, but for just a second they had been something else. That's when I noticed the people walking between the trees. Tiny figures moving through the forest in straight lines, too many of them, and they were all walking in the same direction, toward the tower. I grabbed my binoculars and looked closer. The people were wearing Forest Service uniforms, but they moved wrong, too smooth, like they were floating just above the ground. One of them looked up at me. Even from that distance, I could see his face clearly. It was Tommy. Tommy, who died when he hit the ground in Idaho. He waved at me. Without thinking, I waved back. The moment I did, all of them stopped walking and looked up at the tower. Maybe 30 people, all staring at me, all with faces I knew, all dead. I went back inside and locked the door. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely work the lock. The radio was talking again, my voice, but not my words. "Tower 47 to base. I see them coming. They want to bring me home." I hadn't said that. I was standing by the door, nowhere near the radio. I walked over and picked up the microphone. "Base, this is Tower 47. Disregard that last transmission." "What transmission, Bobby? You haven't called in 2 hours." 2 hours. I just talked to them. But when I looked at my watch, it said 9 a.m. now. The hands were moving again. Never mind, everything's fine up here." "You sure? You sound stressed." I almost told them everything right then. About the dead men in the forest, about time moving wrong, about my own voice on the radio saying things I never said. "I'm fine," I lied. But I wasn't fine. Nothing was fine. That afternoon, I found more carvings on the trees around the tower, all in my handwriting, all dated in the future. Bobby joined us July 4th. The harvest is ready August 15th. Don't fight it September 1st. I didn't remember making any of those carvings, but the knife marks were fresh. As the sun went down, the forest got quiet. Too quiet. No birds, no wind, no insects, just silence so thick it felt like it was pressing against my ears. That's when I heard the voices. They came from below the tower, dozens of voices, all talking. At once, but they weren't speaking out loud. The words were inside my head. "Bobby, come down, Bobby, we're waiting. It doesn't hurt. It's peaceful. You'll never feel guilty again. Just climb down, one step at a time." I looked out the window. The dead men were standing in a circle around the base of the tower, looking up at me, waiting. Jake stepped forward from the group. When he spoke, his voice came from right behind my ear, even though he was 100 feet below. "You killed us, Bobby, but we forgive you. Come down and we'll make it right." "We'll take the guilt away," Tommy added. "All you have to do is join us." "We're not dead," said Mike. "We're just different now. Better." I backed away from the window, but their voices followed me. "This mountain is special, Bobby. Things happen here. Things that can fix what's broken." I covered my ears, but it didn't help. The voices were inside my head. "The guilt will eat you alive if you stay up there, but down here with us, you'll never hurt again." I wanted to believe them. The guilt from Idaho was like a weight in my chest that never went away. Every breath hurt. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them falling. "Just climb down," they said together. "It's time to come home." I looked out the window again. They were still there waiting, and behind them I could see others, dozens of others, people in old uniforms from different times, all standing perfectly still, all looking up at me. My hand was on the door handle before I realized what I was doing. The voices got excited. "That's right, Bobby. Just open the door." But something stopped me. A memory. The day I got this job, the supervisor had said something strange. He said, "The last guy who worked this tower just disappeared one day, left all his stuff behind, never came down." "How many others?" I whispered. The voices went quiet. "How many others have you taken?" Jake's voice came back, but it sounded different now. Colder. "Does it matter, Bobby? You're going to join us anyway. Tonight, or tomorrow, or next week. This mountain always gets what it wants." I looked at my hands. They were starting to look pale, transparent, like I was fading away. "What's happening to me?" "You're becoming like us," Mike said. "It's already started. There's no way to stop it now." I spent that night trying to figure out how to fight back. But every time I came up with a plan, the voices in my head would whisper why it wouldn't work. "You can't call for help. Who would believe you? You can't climb down. We're waiting. You can't stay up here forever. You're already changing." They were right about the changing part. When I looked in the small mirror above my sink, my reflection was getting harder to see, like I was becoming a ghost. But I had to try something. At sunrise, I called base on the radio. "This is Tower 47. I need immediate evacuation, medical emergency." The voice that came back wasn't the dispatcher I knew. It was Jake. "No evacuation needed, Bobby. You're exactly where you belong." I switched to different radio channels, emergency frequencies, Forest Service channels. All I got was static or voices of dead people telling me to come down. That's when I understood the truth. This wasn't just about the mountain being haunted. This place was like a trap, a place that caught people and changed them. And once you were caught, you helped catch others. I thought about the supervisor who gave me this job, how eager he'd been to send me up here, how he'd smiled when I said yes. I thought about all the missing people over the years, hikers who vanished, workers who never came home, how many of them were down there in the forest. Right now, waiting for the next person to climb this tower. The worst part was, I was starting to understand why they did it. The voices were right about one thing. Up here, alone with my guilt, I was dying slowly. The pain of what happened in Idaho was eating me alive. Down there with them, I wouldn't hurt anymore. "It's not so bad," Tommy's voice said, gentle now. "We take care of each other. We're family." "A family of the lost," Jake added. "People who needed a place to belong." "You'll still be you," Mike promised. "Just better, without the pain." I was tempted. God help me, I was really tempted. But then I remembered something my grandfather told me when I was little. He'd been a firefighter too, back in the day. He said the worst fires weren't the big ones you could see coming. They were the small ones that crept up on you, the ones that looked safe until it was too late to run. This felt like one of those fires. I made my choice. Instead of climbing down to join them, I did something they didn't expect. I started climbing up. up the outside of the tower, to the very top. Higher than the cabin, higher than I was supposed to go. The voices got angry. "Bobby, no, come back down. You can't escape us up there. You'll fall." But I kept climbing. My hands were so pale now I could see through them, but they still worked. The metal ladder rungs were ice cold even, though the sun was shining. At the very top of the tower, I found something the dead people didn't want me to see, a small metal box welded to the highest beam. Inside was a logbook. Not the official one from the cabin. This one was different. It had entries from dozens of people going back 50 years, all of them describing the same things I'd experienced, the voices, the visions, the slow change from human to something else. The last entry was from a guy named Carl, dated 3 years ago. "If you're reading this, you made it to the top. Good. That means you're still fighting. The tower is a machine. It feeds on guilt and regret. It finds broken people and offers them peace. But the price is everything you are. Don't listen to the voices. Don't go down to them. The only way out is to stop feeding the machine, break the cycle." Below that, in different handwriting, "Carl didn't make it. They got him in the end. But maybe you'll be stronger. Susan, 1987. And below that, Susan's down there with us now. Sorry. Mark, 1994. Page after page of people who'd tried to fight and failed. All of them eventually joining the army of the lost in the forest below. But the last entry was different. Recent. Maybe just a few months old. "My name is David Chen. I worked this tower for 6 months before I figured out what was happening. The machine needs willing victims. People who choose to climb down. If you refuse, if you really, truly refuse, it can't take you, but you have to mean it. You have to be willing to die up here rather than become one of them. I'm going to try. To climb down the outside of the tower, past them, and make it to the road. If this doesn't work, tell my family I love them. If you're reading this, maybe I made it, maybe there's hope." I looked down at the forest. The dead were still there, waiting. But now I could see what they really were. Not ghosts, not spirits. Just empty shells, being used by something hungry. Something that had been feeding here for decades. I had a choice to make. I could climb down and join them. Stop hurting. Stop feeling guilty about Idaho. But lose everything that made me human. Or I could fight. Really fight. Risk everything for the chance to stay myself. The voices were getting desperate now. "Bobby, please, don't make this harder than it has to be. We love you. We want to help you. The guilt will kill you if you don't let us take it away." I thought about Idaho, about Tommy and Jake and Mike, about how it felt when I made the wrong call and they died because of it. The guilt was killing me. That part was true. But it was my guilt, my pain, my responsibility. And I wasn't ready to give that up. Even if it hurt, even if it never stopped hurting, because the pain meant I was still human, still capable of caring about the people I'd lost. I started climbing down the outside of the tower, away from the ladder they expected me to use. It was dangerous. If I fell, I'd die, but that was better than becoming an empty shell in their collection. The voices turned angry, threatening. "You can't escape. This mountain will never let you go. We'll find you wherever you run. You belong to us now." But as I climbed down past them, staying on the outside of the tower where they couldn't reach, something strange happened. They started to fade, not disappear, just become less real, like they'd only been solid because I believed in them. By the time I reached the ground, they were just shadows between the trees, whispers on the wind. I ran, down the mountain, through the forest, not stopping until I reached my truck at the bottom. As I drove away, I looked back once at Tower 47. In the afternoon sun, it looked like just a normal fire lookout, nothing special, nothing scary. But I knew better now. I never went back to work for the Forest Service. Couldn't. Every time I thought about it, I remembered the voices trying to take away my guilt. The guilt is still there. It probably always will be. Tommy, Jake, and Mike died because I made a mistake, and no amount of running from that fact will bring them back. But the guilt is mine, the pain is mine, the responsibility is mine, and I'm keeping it, because that's what makes me human. If you ever find yourself on a mountain, feeling like something's watching you from high places, trust that feeling. And if you ever see Tower 47 on Crow's Nest Mountain, don't climb it. Some jobs aren't worth taking, no matter how much they promise to take your pain away. My name is Vincent O'Sullivan, but everyone calls me Vince. I used to be a forest ranger, used to be the key words there. 3 months ago, I made the worst mistake of my life. I was supposed to check the fire lines near Salmon Creek. Instead, I went fishing. Just for 2 hours, I told myself. What could happen in 2 hours? A lot, it turns out. The Johnson family was camping that weekend. Mom, Dad, 3 kids. The littlest one was only 5 years old. When the fire started, they had no warning, no time to run. I should have been there. I should have seen the smoke first, called it in, got everyone out safe. But I was sitting by a stream with a fishing rod in my hands while they burned. The Forest Service let me go quietly. No criminal charges, they said, just a career over. And 5 people dead because I wanted to catch some fish. So when they offered me this job, watching an old logging camp up in northern Idaho, I took it. Guard duty, they called it. Make sure nobody steals equipment or starts fires. Perfect job for someone who can't be trusted with anything important anymore. Highway 12 cuts through some of the loneliest country you'll ever see. Mile after mile of dead trees left over from the big fire 10 years back. When I reached mile marker 47, I turned onto a dirt road that looked like it hadn't seen a car in months. The logging camp sat in a clearing surrounded by burned stumps and skeleton trees. 5 or 6 old buildings, weathered grey as old bones. A rusted crane sat in the middle like some giant dead spider. It was December 15th and cold. Not regular cold, this was different. Like the air itself was empty, like warmth had just given up and left. I parked my truck next to what used to be the main office and grabbed my gear. The Forest Service had left me a radio, some basic supplies, and a folder with instructions. Simple enough, check in twice a day, keep an eye on things, don't let anyone in. The cabin they'd fixed up for me was small but clean. Wood stove, basic kitchen, bed in the corner. On the table sat a notebook. My logbook, I figured. I opened it to write my first entry. That's when I saw the handwriting, my handwriting, in blue ink. December 16th, second day here. Something's not right about this place. I stared at the page. Today was December 15th. I was sure of it. I checked my phone. Yep, December 15th. But there was my writing, dated tomorrow, talking about a second day I hadn't lived yet. I flipped through more pages, all blank, just that one entry in my own hand. My hands shook a little as I set the notebook down. Maybe I'd written it wrong. Maybe I'd gotten confused about the date. But deep down, I knew my own handwriting. I knew I'd never written those words. I tried my GPS to double-check where I was. The screen flickered, then showed a message. Location, JOHNSONFAMILYROAD. That wasn't right. This was Forest Service Road 247. But there it was, spelling out the name of the family I'd failed to save, letter by letter on my GPS screen. I turned the device off and on again. This time it worked normally, showing the right road name. But my hands were sweating despite the cold. Outside, the wind picked up. It made a sound through the dead trees that wasn't quite like normal wind. It sounded almost like voices, like whispers you can't quite make out. I set up my radio and tried to check in with the Forest Service office in Coeur d'Alene. Static. Filled my earpiece, then cleared up. Requesting backup at Deadwood Ridge. That was my voice calling for backup, but I wasn't talking. Hunger workers in Sector 7. What were hunger workers? I'd never heard that term in all my years with the Forest Service. New guy won't last 3 days. The radio went quiet. I tried calling again, but got nothing but static. I walked outside to check my truck. Everything looked normal, but as I headed back to the cabin, I noticed something in the dirt. Footprints. Boot prints, leading from my truck to the cabin door. That made sense. They were my prints, but they were also leading away from the cabin, heading into the woods. Same boots, same size, same wear pattern on the sole. My prints going both directions at the same time. I followed the ones heading into the woods. They led about 50 yards to a clearing where someone had left children's toys. A red ball, some building blocks, a stuffed rabbit with one ear missing. The blocks were arranged to spell something, but I couldn't figure out what. From one angle they spelled before. When I walked around to the other side, they spelled after. But they were the same blocks, in the same positions. The rabbit looked familiar. Something about its missing ear tugged at my memory. Then I remembered. The Johnson family's youngest daughter had been holding one just like it in the photo they'd shown on the news. I picked up the rabbit. It was warm, like someone had just been holding it. But that was impossible. This place had been empty for months. The wind died completely, not a whisper, not a rustle. The silence was so deep it made my ears ring. In that perfect quiet, I heard something that made my blood freeze. Somewhere in the distance a chainsaw started. Up and over the sound of its engine, I could swear I heard it calling my name. Vince, Vince, Vince. I ran back to the cabin and locked the door behind me. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I told myself it was just coincidence, old equipment making noise, wind playing tricks. But as I sat there in the growing dark, I kept thinking about that notebook entry, about tomorrow's date in my own handwriting, about footprints going two ways at once. Outside, the chainsaw kept running, and it kept calling my name. I should have left right then, should have thrown my gear in the truck and driven straight back to town. But where would I go? Back to a world where everyone knew I'd let 5 people die because I wanted to catch fish. At least here, whatever was wrong, it felt like something I deserved. The chainsaw finally stopped around midnight. But the silence that followed was somehow worse than the noise had been. I didn't sleep much that first night, and when I did, I dreamed of children's toys, spelling words that changed when I wasn't looking directly at them. When I woke up, I checked the notebook again. There was a new entry, dated December 17th. Third day, the hungry ones are getting closer. In my handwriting, again. I woke up on December 16th with scratches on my arms. 3 long lines on each arm, like I'd been clawed by something big. They didn't hurt, but they were deep enough to have bled during the night. The weird part, the scratches spelled letters. On my left arm, J-O-H. On my right arm, N-S-O-N. Johnson, the family name. I tried to remember if I'd hurt myself somehow, maybe scratched against something sharp in my sleep, but these cuts were too clean, too even, like someone had carved them with a knife. I bandaged my arms and made coffee. The radio crackled to life while I was eating breakfast. Base to Ridge. Patrol, come in. That was a real voice this time, human, normal. This is Ridge Patrol, I answered. Morning, Vince. How's your first night treating you? Fine, I lied. All quiet up here. Good to hear. Listen, we've got reports of some folks trying to get into that area. Treasure hunters, maybe. If you see anyone, just call it in. Don't try to handle it yourself. Copy that. Oh, and Vince, if you hear any strange sounds at night, chainsaws, machinery, that sort of thing, don't worry about it. Old logging equipment sometimes kicks on by itself. Cold weather, you know? The radio went quiet before I could ask what he meant. Old. Equipment kicking on by itself. That didn't make any sense. Equipment needs gas, needs someone to pull the starter cord. But it made me feel a little better. Maybe there was a normal explanation for what I'd heard. I decided to explore the camp during daylight, get familiar with the place, maybe find where that chainsaw sound had come from. The main logging building was bigger than it looked from outside. Huge saws and cutting tables covered in dust and rust. In the back corner I found something that made my skin crawl. A chainsaw. Old, but in perfect condition, like someone had been taking care of it. The gas tank was full. The chain was sharp and clean. I touched the engine block. Still warm. My hands started shaking again. I backed away from the saw and headed for the door. That's when I heard voices outside. Told you someone would be here. New guys, perfect. Guilt makes them. Easier. I crept to the window and looked out. Nothing. No people, no cars, nothing. But the voices kept talking. Worked on the last 3 rangers. Hunger workers need fresh meat. There was that word again. Hunger workers. What did it mean? I grabbed my radio. Base, this is Ridge Patrol. I'm hearing voices near. The camp. Possible intruders. Static. Then, no one's supposed to be in that area, Vince. You sure you're hearing voices? Positive. Multiple people talking about hunger workers. Long pause. Hunger workers. Where'd you hear that term? From the voices. What does it mean? Another pause. Vince, there's no such thing as hunger workers. Maybe you're just tired. First night in a new place can mess with your head. But I knew what I'd heard, and the way his voice changed when I said hunger workers, like he knew exactly what I was talking about. I spent the rest of the day checking the other buildings. In the old office, I found personnel files from the 1920s. Most of the pages were too faded to read, but one name was still clear. O'Sullivan, Patrick, missing, December 1923. O'Sullivan, my family name, and he'd gone missing here at this. Same camp, almost exactly 100 years ago. That couldn't be a coincidence. I kept looking through the files, more names, more missing dates, all in December, all during winter storms when no one could get in or out easily. As evening came, I noticed something else strange. The toys in the clearing had moved. The blocks still spelled words, but now they said hungry from one side and soon from the other. The stuffed rabbit was gone. I found it later, sitting on my cabin's front step. Around its neck was a note in handwriting I didn't recognize. They're coming. For you tonight. Don't sleep, don't dream, don't let them in. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the paper. Someone was playing games with me. Had to be. Maybe other rangers, testing the new guy, maybe local kids. But way out here, miles from the nearest town, I locked myself in the cabin and turned on every light, made more coffee, checked my radio. Every few minutes, the Forest Service manual said to check in twice a day, but no one answered when I tried. Around 9 p.m., I heard footsteps outside. Slow, heavy steps circling the cabin. I grabbed a flashlight and looked out the window. Nothing there, but the footsteps kept going, around and around, like someone walking in circles. At 10 p.m., the steps stopped. Everything went quiet. At 11:47 p.m., the chainsaw started again. This time I was ready for it. I had my flashlight, my radio, everything. I unlocked the door and stepped outside. "Hello," I called. "Who's out there?" The chainsaw got louder. It was coming from the main building where I'd found the warm saw earlier. I walked toward the sound, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. The building door was open now. I was sure I'd closed it. Inside, the chainsaw was running, but no one was holding it. It sat on the work table, engine roaring, chain spinning, all by itself. I reached for the kill switch. "Vince!" The saw was talking. The engine noise shaped itself into words. "Vince, come closer." I backed toward the door. "This isn't real. Equipment doesn't talk." "Vince, you killed them." The words hit me like a punch in the gut. "I didn't mean to. I was just..." "You let them burn while you fished." I know I did." "Come closer. Vince, let us help you." The saw's chain spun faster. Sparks flew where it touched the table. "Help me how?" "Make the guilt stop. Make everything stop." Part of me wanted to step closer. The guilt was eating me alive. Had been for months. Maybe. Whatever this was, it could make the pain go away. But something in the saw's voice scared me worse than the guilt ever had. I ran back to the cabin and slammed the door. Outside, the chainsaw kept running until dawn, and all night long it kept calling my name. When morning came, I found new words carved into the cabin's wooden door. Day 2, you're getting hungry, aren't you? I wasn't just hungry, I was starving. I'd been so scared I'd forgotten to eat dinner. My stomach felt like it was eating itself from the inside, but that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that the words were carved from the inside of the door, like someone had been in the cabin with me all night, carving while I sat 3 feet away, and I still had no memory of writing that entry in my logbook. By the 3rd day, I wasn't sure what was real anymore. I'd wake up and find my boots by the door, covered in mud and pine needles. But I never remembered going outside. The scratches on my arms had healed too fast. They should have taken days, but they were just pink lines now. And I was so hungry, not normal hungry. This felt different, like my stomach was a hole that went all the way through me. I'd brought plenty of food, canned soup, crackers, dried meat, but nothing tasted right. Everything was like cardboard in my mouth. I'd eat a whole can of soup and still feel empty. The radio had been quiet for 2 days. Every time I tried to call base, I got static. But sometimes I'd hear voices in that static, whispers talking about things I couldn't quite understand. The new one's ready. Hunger makes them weak. Been too long since we fed. I started leaving the radio on all the time, hoping to catch a clear signal. That's how I heard the emergency call. Mayday, Mayday. This is Helicopter 729 requesting immediate assistance. We have engine failure over Deadwood Ridge area. My heart jumped. Real people, real voices. I grabbed the radio. Helicopter 729, this is Forest Service. I'm at the logging camp. What's your location? Thank God we're coming down. Hard, can you see us? I ran outside and looked up. Sure enough, there was a helicopter, low and tilting to one side, engine coughing. I see you, I said into the radio. There's a clearing next to the camp. Can you make it? We'll try. The helicopter landed hard, bouncing twice before settling. The pilot climbed out, and I jogged over to help. You okay? I asked. He looked at me with tired eyes. Been better. Radio's been acting up for days. Good thing you were here. What happened to your engine? Don't know. Just started cutting out. Strangest thing, instruments kept showing different locations. Said we were flying over places that don't exist. That sounded familiar, like my GPS spelling out the Johnson family name. I'm Vince, said. Forest Service. Mike Torres. Search and rescue. He shook my hand. Listen, we've been looking for someone. Ranger named Patterson. Went missing up here about a month ago. My blood went cold. Missing? Yeah. Was doing the same job you are now. Watching this camp. Stopped checking in, stopped answering his radio. When we came looking, found his truck, but no sign of him. What do you think happened? Mike looked around at the dead trees, the empty buildings. Honestly, this place gives me the creeps. Wouldn't surprise me if he just walked off into the woods. Some places mess with your head, you know. I knew exactly what he meant. Can I use your radio? I asked. Mine's been acting up too. Sure, but ours is doing the same thing. That's why we crashed. Started picking up voices that weren't there, coordinates that didn't make sense. He handed me his radio anyway. I tried. Calling base. Forest Service base, this is O'Sullivan at Deadwood Ridge. We have a downed helicopter, need assistance. Static. Then a voice that made my skin crawl. Vincent O'Sullivan, we've been waiting for you. Mike frowned. That didn't sound like dispatch. O'Sullivan family has a debt to pay. Patrick couldn't finish it. Maybe you can. I turned off the radio fast. Just interference, I lied. But Mike was looking at me strange. O'Sullivan, that name's in our files. Patrick O'Sullivan went missing here in 1923. That was my great-grandfather. Small world. Mike didn't look like he believed in coincidences. Listen, my engine's shot. gonna be dark soon. Mind if I stay in your cabin tonight? We can hike out in the morning." I wanted to say yes. Having another person around felt safer, but something in his eyes worried me. They looked hungry. "Sure," I said anyway, "but I should warn you. Strange things happen here at night." "What kind of strange things?" I told him about the chainsaw, the voices, the toys that moved by themselves. He listened without laughing or telling me I was crazy. "You know what I think?" he said when I finished. "I think this place is a test." "A test?" "For people like us, people who've messed up, who have guilt eating them alive." He looked right at me. "What did you do, Vince? What's your guilt?" I found myself telling him about the Johnson family, about going fishing instead of checking the fire lines, about 5 people dying because I wanted to catch some trout. Mike nodded like he understood. "I lost a kid once. Search and rescue call. Little girl fell down a mine shaft. I was drunk that day. Shouldn't have been flying, but they needed me. Crashed the helicopter trying to land. By the time backup arrived, she was dead." We sat in silence for a while. 2 guilty men in a place that seemed to feed on guilt. As it got dark, Mike helped me board up the windows. "If weird stuff happens," he said, "we stick together. Don't let them separate us." "Them?" "Whatever's out there. I've heard stories about places like this, places where people disappear. They always try to split you up first." Around midnight, the sound started. Footsteps circling the cabin, scratching at the walls, voices calling our names. But this time, I wasn't alone. Mike heard them too. "That's not wind," he whispered. "No, it's not." Something big hit the door. The whole cabin shook. "Vince, Mike, come outside." The voice sounded like it was coming from everywhere at once. "We know what you did. We know your guilt. Let us help." "You carry it." Mike looked at me. "Part of me wants to go out there." "Me too. What do you think they are?" I thought about Patrick O'Sullivan, missing for 100 years, about Ranger Patterson, gone for a month, about all those personnel files from the 1920s. "I think they used to be people like us," I said. "People who came here feeling guilty, people who wanted punishment." The scratching got louder, like claws on wood. "Vince, your family owes us. Patrick promised us something. You need to pay his debt." "What debt?" I called out. "Blood, flesh. Join us and the guilt stops forever." Mike grabbed my arm. "Don't listen. Whatever they're offering, it's not worth it." But the hungry feeling in my stomach was getting worse. And the guilt, God, the guilt was like a weight crushing my chest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the Johnson family burning while I sat by a stream with a fishing rod. Maybe they were right. Maybe I deserved whatever was out there. "Vince, no." Mike saw the look on my face. "Don't even think about it." The door handle started to turn. I hadn't unlocked it, but it was turning anyway. "They're coming in," Mike whispered. The door opened, and something stepped inside. It looked like a person, but wrong. Too tall, too thin, with fingers that ended in claws. Its face was human once, maybe, but stretched out and hungry. Behind it came more shapes. All of them used to be people, all of them starving for something that wasn't food. "Hello, Vincent," the first one said. "We've been waiting so long to meet you." Its voice sounded exactly like the chainsaw had, like hunger shaped into words. "Your great-grandfather was supposed to join us, but he ran away, left us empty, left us waiting. I don't understand." "You will. The hunger explains everything once you stop fighting it." Mike stepped in front of me. "Leave him alone." The thing that used to be a person smiled. "Mike Torres, lost a little girl because you were drunk. We know about you too. That's not, I wasn't. Come with us, and you'll never feel guilty again. Never feel anything again." The hungry feeling in my gut got stronger, like my body was eating itself from the inside. And looking at these things, these people who used to be people, I could see they'd found a way to make it stop. All I had to do was stop being human. Mike grabbed my shoulder. Fight it, Vince. Whatever they're showing you, it's not real peace. It's just empty. But empty sounded good. Empty sounded like relief. The thing stepped closer. Choose quickly. The hunger only gets worse. And it was right. I was starving for something I couldn't name. Something these creatures had or used to have or had given up to get rid of. I looked at Mike, then at the things that used to be people. What happens if I say no? Then you stay hungry forever, and when you die you'll still be hungry. At least with us, the hunger has purpose. What purpose? The thing smiled wider, showing teeth that were too sharp. We feed on guilt, Vincent. And there's so much guilt in the world. So many people who need our help. I could feel myself wanting to say yes. Wanting to stop the pain, stop the guilt, stop being human. But Mike was still standing there, still fighting. If he could fight it, maybe I could too. Maybe. I don't know how long we stood there staring at those things. Could have been minutes. Could have been hours. Time felt broken in that cabin. Mike was breathing hard next to me. Vince, he whispered, we need to run. But I couldn't move. The hunger in my stomach was so strong now that it hurt. And looking at these creatures, I could see they didn't hurt anymore. They looked peaceful, empty but peaceful. Vincent, the tall one said again, your great-grandfather made us a promise, said the O'Sullivan family would help us feed, but he ran away before he could keep his word. I don't know anything about a promise. Look in your pocket. I didn't want to, but my hand moved on its own. In my jacket pocket was a piece of paper I'd never seen before. Old, yellow, torn at the edges, written in faded ink. I, Patrick O'Sullivan, promise to return and feed the hungry ones. If I cannot return, my family will take my place. Signed this day, December 23rd, 1923. The handwriting looked like mine, just like the notebook entries I couldn't remember writing. That's impossible, I said. I never wrote this. Your great-grandfather wrote it, just before he escaped. But a promise is a promise, Vincent, even if it takes 100 years to keep. Mike grabbed the paper from my hands and tore it up. It's fake. Has to be. People can't make promises that bind their whole family. The creatures laughed. It sounded like wind through dead trees. Tell us, Mike Torres, one of them said. How many search and rescue calls have you missed because you were drinking? How many people died while you sat in a bar? Mike went pale. Just the one girl, just Emma. Emma Rodriguez, age 7, but also David Chen, age 43. Heart attack on Mount Spokane while you were too drunk to fly. Sarah Williams, age 28, lost in the woods for 3 days because you couldn't get your helicopter started. No. That's not... I don't remember. You don't remember because the guilt would break you. We're offering to take all of it away, both of you. I felt something changing in my chest, like my heart was getting colder. The guilt about the Johnson family was still there, but now I was remembering other things. Too. Other times I'd been lazy, careless, selfish. The forest fire 2 years before the Johnsons. I'd seen smoke, but didn't report it because I was off duty. Someone else had to spot it, call it in hours later. The lost hiker I'd given up searching for because it was getting dark and I wanted to go home. They found his body 3 weeks later, just a mile from where I'd stopped looking. All those little moments when I could have done better, tried harder, cared more. You see, the tall creature said, the guilt never really goes away, it just hides, but we can make it stop forever. My hands were shaking, not from fear anymore, but from hunger. I was so hungry I couldn't think straight. What do you want? From me? Simple. Stop fighting what you are. You're already changing, Vincent. Can't you feel it? I looked down at my hands. My fingernails were longer than they'd been that morning. Sharper. And my teeth, when I ran my tongue over them, they felt different. Pointed. This isn't real, Mike said, but his voice was shaky. We're having some kind of breakdown. Isolation, stress, guilt, it can make you see things. The creatures moved closer. Now I could see them better, and I realized something horrible. They weren't just wearing human faces, they were human faces, stretched and changed, but still recognizably. People. The tall one had been a forest ranger once. I could see the faded patch on his shirt. The one behind him wore the remains of a pilot's uniform. And in the back, almost hidden by shadows, was a man in newer gear. Recent gear. "Patterson," I whispered. The man in back looked up. His face was gaunt, his eyes empty, but I recognized him from the employee photos back at headquarters. "Hello, Vince," he said. His voice was hollow. "Been waiting for you to get here. They said you went missing." "I did, but I found something better than being found." He stepped forward. "I found a way to stop carrying all that weight." "What weight?" "Same as yours, same as everyone who ends up here. We're all rangers who failed somebody, pilots who crashed, rescuers who didn't rescue. This place, it calls to people like us." Mike shook his head. "No, I refuse to believe this. We're having hallucinations, shared psychosis. It happens to people stuck together in stressful situations." But even as he said it, I could see he was changing too. His face looked thinner. His eyes looked hungrier. "Mike," I said, "look at your hands." He held them up. His fingernails were getting longer too. "It's not real," he said again, but he sounded less sure. The tall creature smiled. "Reality is what you make it. And right now, you're both making the same choice Patrick made 100 years ago. The choice to let go. What happened to Patrick? He ran, made it all the way to California before the hunger caught up with him, died in a hospital talking about monsters in the woods. But the promise stayed. Waited for the next O'Sullivan to come home." I thought about my family, my parents, my sister, my cousins. Would one of them end up here if I ran like Patrick did? "If I stay," I said slowly, "if I become like you, does the promise end? Forever. Your family goes free, and you stop hurting." It was tempting. God, it was tempting. The guilt about the Johnson family was like a weight on my chest every single day. And now, remembering all the other times I'd failed people, it felt like I was drowning. "Vince, don't listen to them," Mike said, but he was backing toward the door. "We can fight this. We can get help." "What help?" "We're 50 miles from the nearest town. No working radio, no working helicopter. And even if we make it out, then..." "What?" "Spend the rest of our lives remembering everyone we let down." "Yes, because that's what being human means. Living with mistakes, learning from them." The tall creature laughed. "Mike Torres, still trying to be the hero. How did that work out for little Emma?" Mike flinched like he'd been hit. "Shut up. 7 years old. Fell down a mine shaft while you were drinking whiskey at Murphy's bar. By the time you sobered up enough to fly, she'd been calling for help for 6 hours. Shut up! She died calling for her mommy, but her mommy wasn't there, and neither were you." Mike lunged at the creature, but his hands passed right through it. He stumbled and fell to the floor. That's when I realized the truth. These things weren't really there. Not physically. They were in our heads, using our guilt against us, feeding on it. But knowing that didn't make them less real, and it didn't make the hunger go away. I helped Mike to his feet. "We need to get out of here." "Where?" "They're everywhere now, in the trees, in the buildings, in our thoughts." He was right. When I looked out the window, I could see shapes moving between the dead trees. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. All the people who'd come here over the years, looking for punishment and finding something worse. "The truck," I said. "If we can, make it to the truck." "Then what? Drive back to town and tell everyone we've been seeing monsters? They'll lock us up." "Maybe that's better than this." Mike looked at me with hollow eyes. "You really think we can leave? You think they'll let us?" I didn't answer because I didn't know. But I was changing, and I could feel it happening faster now. My teeth were definitely sharper. My vision was getting better in the dark. And the hunger. The hunger was starting to focus on something specific, on Mike. I looked at him and didn't see a friend anymore. I saw food. I saw a way to make the empty feeling stop. Vince? Mike stepped back. You're looking at me funny. I'm sorry, I whispered. I don't think I can stop it. The tall creature smiled. Welcome home, Vincent O'Sullivan. Your great-grandfather would be proud. I took a step toward Mike. He ran for the door, but I was faster now, much faster, and I was so very hungry. Mike made it maybe 20 feet before I caught him. I tackled him to the ground near his crashed helicopter. He fought back, but I was stronger now, much stronger. My hands didn't feel like my hands anymore. Vince, please, he gasped. This isn't you. You're a good person. No, I said, and my voice sounded different, colder. I let 5 people burn while I went fishing. I'm not good. That was a mistake. People make mistakes. Some mistakes can't be forgiven. I could smell his fear. And underneath that, something else, something that made my mouth water, the smell of guilt, of shame, of all the people he'd failed to save. It smelled delicious. Vince, listen to me. If you do this, you become one of them. Is that what you want? I looked back at the cabin. The creatures were watching us, waiting. They looked happy, peaceful, like they'd found exactly what they'd been looking for. Maybe it is, I said, but something held me back. Maybe it was Mike's face, so scared and desperate. Maybe it was the memory of who I used to be before the guilt ate me alive. Tell me about Emma, I said. What? The little girl. Tell me what really happened. Mike closed his eyes. I was drunk, off duty, but they called me anyway. Emergency. No other pilots available. He took a shaky breath. I should have said no, should have told them to wait for someone sober. But you didn't. I thought I could handle it, thought I was fine, but when I tried to land near the mine shaft, I clipped a tree, helicopter went down hard. By the time they got another pilot out there, she was dead. Yeah, 6 hours in the dark, calling for help that never came. I felt the hunger getting stronger as he talked. His guilt was feeding it, making it grow. You know what the worst part is? Mike whispered. I kept flying after that, kept taking rescue calls, and I kept drinking. 3 more people died because I was too drunk or too hungover to do my job. Right. The creatures were moving closer now, drawn by his confession. I could feel them feeding on his words, growing stronger. That's why you crashed here, I realized. It wasn't engine failure. You were drunk again. Half a bottle of whiskey before takeoff. Figured if I was going to die, might as well die trying to help someone. But you didn't die. No, I ended up here, with you. And now, he looked at my hands, at my teeth. Now, I'm going to die anyway. I should have killed him then. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to feed, to make the hunger stop. But something in his voice made me pause. He wasn't just confessing. He was asking for forgiveness. And I realized something. The creatures, the hunger, the whole thing, it wasn't about punishment. It was about giving up, about stopping the fight to be better. Mike, I said, what if we don't have to become monsters? What do you mean? What if we just try to be better starting now? Mike looked at me like I was crazy. Vince, you got claws and fangs. I think it's a little late for self-improvement. I looked down at my hands. He was right. I was changing, and I could feel it happening faster every minute. But maybe that didn't have to mean giving up. Help me fight it, I said. How? Tell me something good you did, something you're proud of. How'd? Mike thought for a moment. Last year, little boy got lost in the woods near Spokane. I found him after 2 days of searching. His parents thought he was dead. As he spoke, I felt the hunger ease up a little. Not much, but enough to think clearly. More, I said. The forest fire on Mount Hood. evacuated 30 people before the road got cut off. The hunger eased more. The creatures behind us made angry sounds. "Your turn," Mike said. "Tell me something good." I thought hard. It was difficult with all the guilt in my head. The Wilkins family. Their cabin caught fire 3 years ago. I got all 4 of them out. What else? Taught kids about fire safety at schools. Maybe prevented some accidents. Keep going. We sat there in the dirt, listing good things we'd done. Every word seemed to push the hunger back a little more. The creatures got more and more upset, but they also seemed to get fainter. "It's working," Mike said. "They're fading. Because we're not feeding them anymore. We're not wallowing in guilt." The tall creature came closer. "Vincent, you can't fight what you are. The hunger will come back. It always does." "Maybe," I said, "but right now I'm choosing not to feed it. You'll slip. You'll remember all the people you failed, and when you do, we'll be waiting." He was probably right. The guilt would come back. It always did. But maybe that was okay. Maybe carrying guilt was better than letting it consume you. "Come on," I said to Mike. "Let's get out of here." We walked toward the forest road. My truck was still there, keys in the ignition. The creatures followed us, but they seemed smaller now, less real. "They'll follow us home," Mike said. "Yeah, probably. We'll have to live with what we did forever." "Yeah. You okay with that?" I thought about the Johnson family, about the fire I could have prevented, about all the ways I'd failed people over the years. "No," I said, "but I'm okay with trying to do better." We drove away from Deadwood Ridge in silence. In the rearview mirror, I could see the creatures standing in the road watching us go. They looked disappointed. When we reached the main highway, Mike's radio crackled to life. Real voices, real people. "Search and rescue. This is Forest Service. Base, we have your emergency beacon. What's your status?" Mike picked up the radio. "This is Torres. We're okay. Heading back to base. Copy that. Good to hear your voice." I called in too, reported that the logging camp was secure. Lied about what we'd seen, what we'd experienced. Who would believe the truth? But as we drove, through the night, I kept thinking about what the creature had said. The hunger would come back, the guilt would return, and maybe next time I wouldn't be strong enough to fight it. 3 months later, I heard that another ranger had been assigned to watch Deadwood Ridge. Young guy, fresh out of training, carrying some heavy guilt about a traffic accident he'd caused. I thought about calling him, warning him. But what would I say? Don't go to the place where your guilt might literally eat you alive. Instead, I did something else. I started volunteering at a suicide prevention hotline. Started talking to people who were drowning in guilt and shame. Started helping them find ways to live with their mistakes instead of being consumed by them. It doesn't always work. Some people are too far gone, too hungry for punishment. But sometimes it does. And on the nights when my own guilt comes back, when I remember the Johnson family burning while I sat by a stream, I remind myself that guilt is just a feeling. It doesn't have to become a monster. Most of the time that's enough, but sometimes, late at night, I still hear chainsaws calling my name. And I know that somewhere up on Highway 12, at mile marker 47, something is still waiting for people like me. People who think they deserve to be consumed. The trick is remembering that deserve and choose are 2 different things. And every day, I choose to keep fighting the hunger, even when it's hard, even when I'm not sure I'm winning. Because the alternative is becoming something that feeds on other people's pain, and I've hurt enough people already. My name is Beth Hartwell, and I need to tell you what happened to my family last winter. The police said it was an accident. The newspapers called it a tragedy. But I know the truth now, and maybe if I write it all down, someone will understand. They found us in the spring. 4 bodies sitting around our dinner table, holding hands like we were saying grace. Mom, Dad, little Danny, and Uncle Silas, all peaceful, like we just fell asleep together. There was an empty chair where I should have been sitting. On the wall, they found my drawing of our family. 5 stick figures holding hands under a big, yellow sun. I had written "The Happy Hartwells" in crayon across the top, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. It was December 1963 when we first drove up to the old logging camp. Dad had inherited it from some relative he barely knew, and Mum thought it would be perfect for a fresh start. Dad had been having nightmares since he came back from Korea, and Mum worried about everything, especially about Danny, who was always getting sick, and me, who she said was too sensitive for my own good. "This will be good for us," Mum kept saying, as our car bumped along the dirt road through the tall trees, away from all the noise and worry, just family time. Dad gripped the steering wheel tight, his knuckles white. He did that a lot since the war. "It'll be safe here," he said. "No one can bother us way out here." Danny pressed his face against the window. He was only 8 and still believed in adventures. "Will we see bears, Dad? What about wolves?" "Don't worry," Dad said, checking the rearview mirror for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. "I'll keep everyone safe. That's what dads do." I was 12, old enough to notice things. Like how Dad checked every door twice before bed. How Mom took my temperature even when I wasn't sick. How they both watched us kids like we might disappear if they looked away for even a second. The logging camp sat in a clearing surrounded by thick forest. There were 4 cabins arranged around a main lodge, all made of dark wood that looked almost black against the snow. It felt like the trees were watching us as we unloaded our suitcases. "Isn't it wonderful?" Mum said, but her voice sounded thin in the cold air, so quiet and peaceful. Dad was already walking around the main cabin, checking windows and doors. "Good strong locks," he muttered. "Solid walls. We'll be safe here." Danny ran ahead to explore, and Mom immediately called after him. "Not too far, sweetheart. Stay where I can see you." I helped carry groceries inside while Dad continued his inspection. The main room had a big stone fireplace and a long wooden table. Everything smelled like old wood and something else, something sweet and sad that I couldn't name. "Beth, honey, come help me with Danny's vitamins," Mom called from the kitchen. She had already laid out his pills on the counter, even though we'd just arrived. "And let me feel your forehead. You look flushed." I wasn't flushed, but I let her press her cool hand against my face anyway. It made her feel better to check on us, and I wanted her to be happy here. That first night we sat around the big table for dinner. Dad said grace, thanking God for bringing us together and keeping us safe. Mom made sure Danny ate all his vegetables and that I drank enough milk. Danny chattered about all the exploring he wanted to do, and I drew pictures of our new home. "This is perfect," Mom said, reaching over to squeeze Dad's hand. "Just the 4 of us taking care of each other." Dad squeezed back. "No outside worries here, just family." But even then, I noticed things. How Dad got up 3 times during dinner to check the locks. How Mom felt my forehead twice just to be sure. How Danny kept asking for more attention. More stories, more everything. How I found myself cleaning up without being asked, trying to make everything perfect for them. We were already taking care of each other so much it almost hurt. But we called it love, and love was supposed to be good. After we went to bed, I lay awake listening to the wind in the trees. It sounded like whispers, like voices calling to each other in the dark. I got up to look out my window and saw Dad standing guard by the front door, just watching the forest. "Keeping us safe," I whispered to myself, but something about it didn't feel right. In the morning, Mom made pancakes and checked on Danny twice before he even finished eating. Dad had already been outside, walking around the cabins and looking for tracks in the snow. "Everything's secure," he announced. "We're all alone out here. No one to bother us." "Good," Mom said, but she was already taking my temperature again. "Beth looks pale. Are you feeling all right, sweetheart?" I was fine, but I said maybe I felt a little tired. It made her happy to worry about me, to have something to fix. That's when Uncle Silas showed up. We heard his truck coming long before. We saw it, the engine struggling through the snow. Dad's hand moved to where he used to keep his army knife, and Mom pulled Danny and me closer. "Who could that be?" she whispered. The truck stopped in front of our cabin, and out stepped an old man with Dad's same dark eyes and sharp chin. He walked slow, like his bones hurt, but his smile was warm. "Marcus," he called out, "that you, nephew?" Dad's whole body relaxed. "Uncle Silas? What are you doing here?" "Heard you inherited the old place," Silas said, climbing the porch steps. "Thought I'd come check on you folks. This place, well, it has a history." Mom invited him in for coffee, and he sat at our table like he belonged there. Danny crawled right up to him, hungry for a new person to pay attention to him. "Tell us about the history," I said, because I was curious about everything back then. Uncle Silas looked around the room, his eyes sad. "Lot of families come here over the years, all looking for the same thing: peace, quiet, time together." He paused. "Sometimes they find it. Sometimes they find more than they bargained for." "What do you mean?" Mom asked. "Nothing bad," Silas said quickly. "Just this place has a way of bringing families close. Real close. Some folks say too close." Dad laughed. "We could use some closeness. Been too busy with work and worry back home." "That's what they all say," Silas said quietly. That night, Uncle Silas stayed for dinner. He told stories about the old days, and we all laughed together. But I noticed how he watched us, really watched us, like he was studying how we moved around each other. When Mom cut Danny's meat for him, even though he was 8, Silas noticed. When Dad checked the doors again during dessert, Silas noticed. When I got up to clear plates without being asked, Silas noticed that too. "You're a good family," he said finally. "Take care of each other real well." "We try," Mom said, smoothing Danny's hair. "Family's the most important thing." "Yes," Silas said, but something in his voice made me look up. "It surely is." After dinner, while Mom was getting Danny ready for bed and Dad was doing his nightly security check, I helped Uncle Silas with his coat. "Uncle Silas," I whispered, "what did you mean about families getting too close?" He looked down at me with those dark Hartwell eyes. "Sometimes, little Beth, when people love each other very much, they forget where one person ends and the other begins. Love can be hungry, you know. It wants to eat up everything it touches." I didn't understand what he meant then. I thought, love was just hugs and pancakes and Dad checking the locks to keep us safe. I was wrong about a lot of things back then. Uncle Silas decided to stay a few days to help us settle in. That's when things started to change, though I didn't notice it at first. When you're inside a family, it's hard to see what's really happening. It's like being inside a house. You can't see the shape of it from the inside. But the shape of our family was changing, and Uncle Silas knew exactly what it was changing into. Uncle Silas had been with us for 3 days when I found the box. It was hidden behind some old wood in the storage room, covered with dust and mouse droppings. Inside were papers, letters, diary pages, and photographs, all from families who had stayed here before us. The pictures showed happy families, just like us, moms and dads and children all smiling and holding each other tight. But something about the smiles looked wrong. Too bright, too desperate, like they were trying to prove something. I started reading one of the diaries. It was written by a girl about my age, maybe 10 years ago. "Mom checks on me every hour now," she wrote. "She says it's because she loves me so much. Dad won't let us go outside anymore. He says it's too dangerous. Tommy cries all the time and Mom gives him whatever he wants. She says, crying children break her heart. I clean and cook and take care of everyone because that's what good daughters do. We're so happy here. We're the perfect family." The next entry was different. The handwriting was shaky. "Something's wrong with us. We can't stop watching each other. We can't stop needing each other. It hurts to be apart even for a minute. But it feels good too, like we're finally complete. The last entry was just one line. "We don't want to leave anymore." I closed the diary fast, my hands shaking. I should have told someone. I should have shown Mom and Dad. But something stopped me. Maybe I was scared they wouldn't believe me, or maybe I was scared they would. At dinner that night, Dad asked me twice if I was feeling okay. Mom felt my forehead 3 times. Danny demanded that I sit next to him and help him eat his mashed potatoes, even though he could do it himself. "Beth looks worried," Uncle Silas said, watching me carefully. "Something troubling you, little one?" I almost told him about the box, but Dad spoke first. "She's probably just tired. It's a big change moving here." He reached over and patted my hand. "Don't worry, sweetheart. Daddy's here. Nothing can hurt you." But his hand felt heavy on mine, like it didn't want to let go. That night, I heard Mom and Dad talking in their room. "The children seem different here," Mom was saying. "More needy." "That's good," Dad said. "Means they feel safe with us. Means they trust us to take care of them." Danny asked me to tie his shoes. Today, he's been tying his own shoes for 2 years. He's just being a little boy. Let him depend on us while he can. There was a long pause. Then Mom said, "Marcus, I feel different too. I can't stop worrying about them. Every second they're out of my sight, I panic. What if something happens? What if they need me and I'm not there?" "That's what good mothers do," Dad said. "They worry, they protect. But it's more than that. It's like I need to take care of them. Like if I don't, I'll disappear." "Eleanor, you're being silly. We're just closer here. That's what we wanted, remember? A fresh start, quality family time." But I could hear the uncertainty in his voice too. The next morning, Danny wouldn't eat breakfast unless Mom fed him. He was 8 years old, but he sat there with his mouth open like a baby bird, waiting for her to spoon oatmeal into his mouth. "I can't do it myself," he whined when Dad told him to feed himself. "My arms are too tired." Mom immediately rushed over. "Of course, baby. Mama will help you." She looked happy doing it, but there were dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't slept. Dad spent the morning checking every window and door again, even though he'd done the same thing yesterday and the day before. "Can't be too careful," he muttered. "Have to keep everyone safe." I started following him around, not because I wanted to, but because being away from the family felt wrong now, like I was missing something important. "That's my good girl," Dad said when he noticed me trailing behind him. "Stay close to Daddy." After lunch, Danny had what Mom called one of his spells. He couldn't find his favorite toy car and started crying like the world was ending. Not just normal crying, deep, broken sobs that made my chest hurt to hear. Mum dropped everything and ran to him. She pulled him into her lap and rocked him like he was a baby. "Shh, shh. It's okay," she whispered. "Mama's here. Mama will fix everything." Dad got down on his hands and knees, searching under every piece of furniture for the stupid toy car. I found myself helping, even though I knew Danny was being ridiculous. We spent an hour looking for that car. When we finally found it behind the couch, Danny hugged it tight and smiled at us through his tears. "Thank you for taking care of me," he said. "I love you so much." And we all melted. Mum kissed his forehead about 10 times. Dad ruffled his hair and called him my brave boy. I got him a glass of milk without being asked. It felt good to make him happy. It felt necessary. Uncle Silas watched it all from his chair by the fire. When it was over and Danny was playing quietly, Silas looked at me with those dark eyes. "Lot of love in this family," he said. "Yes," I said. But something in his tone made me add, "Is that bad?" "Love's never bad, Beth, but sometimes it gets confused. Sometimes people think they're showing love when they're really just feeding." "Feeding on what?" He didn't answer, just went back to staring at the fire. That afternoon, the first real snowstorm hit. The wind howled around our cabin like a living thing, and the snow came down so thick we couldn't see the other buildings. Dad immediately went into what Mom called his military mode. He checked our supplies, tested the generator, made sure all the windows were sealed tight. "We're trapped," he announced. But he didn't sound upset about it. He sounded satisfied. "No one's getting in or out until this storm passes." Mom bustled around, making hot chocolate and finding extra blankets. "Well, that's fine," she said. "We have everything we need right here. Just family." Danny clapped his hands. "Like a sleepover that never ends." I should have been excited too. Snow days were usually fun, but something about being completely cut off from the outside world made my stomach twist. Uncle Silas just smiled. "Now the real bonding begins," he said quietly, and he was right. By evening, we couldn't stand to be in separate rooms. Mom started following Dad around, asking if he needed anything, if he was warm enough, if he wanted more coffee. Dad kept getting up to check on Danny and me, making sure we were comfortable, making sure we had everything we needed. Danny wouldn't let go of Mom's hand. Even when she tried to cook dinner, he clung to her like a scared kitten. "I need my mama," he kept saying. "Don't leave me." "I'm not going anywhere, baby," Mom promised. "Mama's right here." But when she finally had to use the bathroom, Danny screamed like she was abandoning him forever. The sound was so awful that Dad and I both came running. "What's wrong with him?" I asked. "He just loves his mama very much," Dad said, but his voice was tight. "There's nothing wrong with loving your family." When Mom came back, Danny threw himself at her legs and wouldn't let go. She had to carry him around for the rest of the evening, even though he was getting too big for that. At dinner, we all sat closer together than usual. Our knees touched under the table. Dad kept reaching over to squeeze Mom's hand. Mom kept smoothing our hair. Danny and I kept asking for things we didn't really need, just to have an excuse to interact with them. "Pass the salt," I said, even though my food wasn't bland. "Can I have more milk?" Danny asked, even though his glass was still half full. "Are you warm enough, sweetheart?" Mom asked me for the third time. "Do you need another blanket, son?" Dad asked Danny. We were like hungry animals, all of us, feeding on each other's attention and care. But it felt like love. It felt necessary. Uncle Silas ate quietly, watching us with those knowing eyes. After dinner, we all squeezed together on the couch to listen to the radio. Mom sat in the middle with Danny on her lap. Dad had his arm around her shoulders, and I curled up against his other side. We listened to music and news, but mostly we just held each other. Outside, the storm raged on, cutting us off from everything except each other. "This is nice," Mom whispered. "Just us. Just family." "Perfect," Dad agreed. "We don't need anyone else." And in that moment, I believed it. We were complete. We were safe. We were loved. But later that night, I heard Uncle Silas talking to himself by the dying fire. "They're ready," he whispered to the flames, "just like all the others, ready to feed." The storm lasted 3 days. By the end, we couldn't remember what it felt like to be separate people. Mom stopped sleeping in her own bed. She said Danny needed her close because of his nightmares, but I think she needed him too. She would lie next to him, stroking his hair and humming lullabies like he was still a baby. Dad started doing the same with me. He said I looked scared, that I needed protection. Really, I think he was the one who was scared. He would sit by my bed until I fell asleep, then check on me 3 or 4 times during the night. None of us wanted to be alone anymore. Even going to the bathroom felt dangerous, like we might disappear if we weren't watching each other. On the 4th morning, when the storm finally stopped, we didn't celebrate. We didn't even notice at first. We were too busy taking care of each other. Mom was feeding Danny his breakfast again, even though his arms worked fine. Dad was helping me get dressed, even though I was 12 and perfectly capable. I was helping Uncle Silas with his coffee, even though he'd been making his own coffee for 50 years. We were like a machine, all of us, each part taking care of the other parts. But machines are supposed to make things. All we were making was more need. The road should be clear soon, Dad said, looking out the window, but he didn't sound happy about it. Why would we want the road clear? Mom asked. We have everything we need right here. Danny nodded, syrup dripping down his chin. I don't want to leave. I want to stay with my family forever. That's my good boy, Mom said, wiping his face with the gentleness she used to save for when he was really sick. Uncle Silas just smiled. Road might be clear, but that doesn't mean anyone's coming or going. That afternoon, something changed in Danny. He was playing with his toy cars on the floor when he suddenly stopped and looked up at us with strange eyes. I'm hungry, he said. We just had lunch, sweetheart, Mum said. You ate 2 sandwiches. Not that kind of hungry. Danny's voice sounded different, older. I'm hungry for something else. He got up and walked to the kitchen, moving in a way that made the hair on my arms stand up. He opened the refrigerator and pulled out the package of raw hamburger meat Mum was saving for dinner. Before any of us could stop him, he tore open the package and took a big bite of the raw meat. Mum screamed. Dad jumped up and tried to grab the meat away, but Danny held on tight, growling like an animal. Danny, stop! I yelled, but he didn't seem to hear me. He kept eating the raw meat, blood running down his chin, his eyes wild and hungry. Not hungry for food, hungry for something we couldn't give him. Finally, Dad got the meat away from him. Danny collapsed on the floor, crying and shaking. I'm sorry, he sobbed. I don't know why I did that. I just felt so empty inside. So hungry. Mom gathered him up in her arms, rocking him like a baby. It's okay, baby. It's okay. Mama's here. But it wasn't okay. We all knew it wasn't okay. Uncle Silas knelt down beside them. It's starting, he said quietly. What's starting? Dad demanded. The hunger, Silas said. The family hunger. It happens to everyone who stays here long enough. You're talking nonsense, Mom said, but her voice was shaky. I... Silas looked around at all of us. When's the last time any of you did something just for yourself? When's the last time you were happy alone? We couldn't answer, because we couldn't remember. Danny's not sick, Silas continued. He's just the first to show what's happening to all of you. You're eating each other up, bit by bit, and you're calling it love. We do love each other, I said, but even as I said it, something felt wrong. I know you do, little Beth, but look at your love. Really look at it. So I did. I looked at Mom, who couldn't let Danny out of her sight without panicking. I looked at Dad, who checked the lock so often his hands were raw from turning the handles. I looked at Danny, who couldn't eat or sleep or even think without one of us helping him. I looked at myself and realized I hadn't had a single thought that wasn't about taking care of someone else in days. We need each other, Mom whispered. No, Silas said gently. You're eating each other. There's a difference. That night at dinner, none of us could eat the hamburger Mom cooked. All we could think about was Danny with blood on his chin, that wild look in his eyes. But something else was happening too. I found myself watching the way Dad cut his meat, the way Mum licked her lips when she was thinking, the way Uncle Silas chewed slowly, like he was savoring every bite. I was thinking about eating, but not food. I was thinking about consuming something deeper. I keep thinking about Danny's face, Mom said suddenly. When he was eating that raw meat, he looked satisfied, like he was finally getting what he needed. Eleanor, Dad warned. No, Marcus, think about it. When do we feel most satisfied? When we're taking care of each other, when we're needed, when we're consuming someone else's attention, someone else's worry, someone else's love. She was right. The best moments were when Danny was sick and needed me to read to him, when Dad was having nightmares and needed Mom to calm him down, when Mom was worried and needed Dad to hold her. We felt most alive when we were feeding on each other's need. It's not wrong to need your family, I said, but my voice sounded small. Need and consumption aren't the same thing, Uncle Silas said. Need can be satisfied. Consumption never stops. After dinner, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the diary I'd found, about the girl who wrote it. She'd sounded happy at first, talking about how much her family loved each other. But by the end, she sounded desperate. I got up and crept to the storage room to read more of the papers I'd found. There were dozens of them. Letters, diary entries, notes, all from different families. But they all said the same things. We can't bear to be apart. Taking care of each other is the only thing that matters. We are complete together. The children need us so much. We need the children so much. And then, in the later entries, the tone would change. Something is wrong with our love. We are consuming each other. The hunger never stops. We can't leave. We don't want to leave. The last entry in every diary was always the same. We have become one family, one body, one hunger. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to find Uncle Silas standing in the doorway. You found them, he said. You knew they were here. I put them here, after each family. He came into the room and sat down heavily on an old crate. I tried to warn you, Beth. I tried to warn all of them. Warn us about what? About what happens to families in this place. About what happens when love becomes hunger. But you stayed, you watched it happen. Uncle Silas nodded, and for the first time he looked ashamed. I stayed because I'm hungry too, hungry for the intensity, for the feeling of being needed so desperately that people would die without you. That's not love. No, he agreed. But it feels like the purest love you've ever experienced. That's what makes it so dangerous. I thought about Mom's face when she was taking care of Danny, about Dad's satisfaction when he checked the locks and kept us safe, about how good it felt when they needed me to help, to comfort, to make everything better. It did feel pure. It felt like the most important thing in the world. What happens next? I whispered. Uncle Silas looked at the papers scattered around us. What always happens? The hunger gets stronger. You'll find ways to feed it that you never imagined, and you'll call it love until the very end. Can we stop it? Do you want to? I opened my mouth to say yes, of course I wanted to stop it. But the words wouldn't come, because the truth was I didn't want to stop. I wanted to go back to the main room where my family was sleeping, all of us close together, taking care of each other. I wanted to check on Danny, smooth his hair, make sure he was breathing. I wanted to see if Mom needed another blanket, if Dad was having nightmares. I wanted to feed the hunger, because the hunger felt like love. And that's when I understood what Uncle Silas meant. The most terrifying thing wasn't that we were becoming monsters. It was that becoming monsters felt like becoming the perfect family. I need to go check on them, I whispered. Uncle Silas nodded sadly. I know you do. I left him there with the papers and crept back to the main room. Mom and Dad were asleep on the couch, holding hands. Danny was curled up between them, sucking his thumb like he hadn't done in years. They looked peaceful. They looked like a family that loved each other very much. I lay down on the floor next to the couch, close enough to touch them if they needed me, close enough to watch them breathe, close enough to make sure they were still there. And I felt satisfied, complete, like I was exactly where I belonged. The hunger was growing stronger, but it felt like coming home. I woke up to the sound of crying, not Danny's usual tears, but something deeper, something broken. It was Mom. She was sitting at the kitchen table with her head in her hands, sobbing like her heart was breaking. "What's wrong?" I asked, rushing to her side. "I can't stop," she whispered. "I can't stop watching you kids. I can't stop checking on you. I went to your room 4 times last night just to make sure you were breathing." Dad appeared in the doorway, his hair messy from sleep. "Eleanor, what's happening?" I'm sick, Marcus. We're all sick. Mom looked up at us with red, swollen eyes. I love you so much it hurts. But it's not normal love anymore. It's something else. Danny wandered in, dragging his blanket. Even though it was almost noon, Mom had let him sleep late because she couldn't bear to wake him up. "Why is Mama crying?" he asked. "Because Mama loves you too much," she said, and started crying harder. Uncle Silas came in from outside, stamping snow off his boots. He took one look at Mom and nodded, like he'd been expecting this. "She's starting to see," he said quietly. "See what?" Dad demanded. "What you've all become. What this place does to families." Dad's face got red. "There's nothing wrong with loving your family. There's nothing wrong with taking care of each other." "Show me," Uncle Silas said. "Show you what? Show me you can leave Danny alone for 1 hour. Show me Eleanor can go to town without panicking about the children. Show me you can sleep in your own bed tonight." We all looked at each other. The thought of being apart for even an hour made my stomach twist into knots. "We don't want to be apart," I said. "What's wrong with that?" "Nothing's wrong with not wanting to be apart," Uncle Silas said gently, "but something's wrong when you can't be apart, when the thought of separation makes you sick, when you need each other so desperately that you've forgotten who you are as individuals." "I know who I am," Dad said, but his voice was uncertain. "Do you? When's the last time you had a thought that wasn't about protecting us? When's the last time you did something just because you wanted to, not because we needed you to?" Dad opened his mouth to answer, then closed it. He couldn't remember either. "What about you, Eleanor?" Uncle Silas turned to Mom. "When did you last feel happy about something that had nothing to do with taking care of your family?" Mom shook her head. "I don't understand the question. That's the problem. You've forgotten that you exist outside of being a mother and wife. You've forgotten that you're a person. Being a mother is the most important thing I do," Mom said. "It's important, but it shouldn't be the only thing you are." Uncle Silas looked at me next. "Beth, what do you want to be when you grow up?" I thought about it. Before we came here, I'd wanted to be a teacher, or maybe a nurse. But now, the only future I could imagine was taking care of my family forever. "I want to stay here," I said. "I want to take care of everyone." "That's not a dream, Beth. That's just continuing what you're already doing." "What's wrong with that?" Danny piped up. "We love each other. We're happy." Uncle Silas knelt down to Danny's level. "Are you happy, little man? Really happy? Or do you just feel safe because everyone's always watching you, always taking care of you?" Danny's face scrunched up like he was thinking hard. I feel safe. But sometimes I feel scared too. Scared of what? Scared that if I don't need them enough, they'll stop loving me. So I try to need them more and more." The words hit us like a punch, because Danny was right. He'd been making himself more helpless every day, and we'd been encouraging it because it made us feel needed. "And what about the rest of you?" Uncle Silas asked. "How far would you go to keep taking care of each other?" "As far as we need to," Dad said immediately. "Even if it hurt you?" "Yes, even if it hurt them?" Dad hesitated. "We would never hurt each other." "Wouldn't you?" Uncle Silas walked to the window and looked out at the forest. What if Danny got really sick and needed medicine, but the only way to get it was to leave him alone for a few hours? Could you do it? "Of course," Mom said, but she didn't sound sure. What if Beth wanted to go to school with other children, but that meant being away from home all day? Would you let her? I realized I didn't want to go to school anymore. Putty, thought of being away from my family for 8 hours a day made me feel panicked. What if Marcus had a chance at a good job, but it meant moving away from this place where you're all so close? Dad shook his head immediately. "We're not leaving. This is our home now. Even if staying here meant slowly forgetting how to be individual people, even if it meant becoming so dependent on each other that you couldn't function alone." "We don't want to function alone," I said. We want to be together." Uncle Silas turned back to us, and his face was sad. "I know you do. That's what makes this so hard." He walked to the storage room and came back with a box. Not the one I'd found with the papers, but a different one, older. "This was my family," he said, opening the box. Inside were photographs of a man, woman, and 3 children. 40 years ago, we came here just like you did, looking for a fresh start, looking for closeness. He pulled out a photograph of a little girl who looked like she could have been my sister. "This was my daughter, Mary. She was 8 years old, full of life and dreams. She wanted to be a dancer." His voice got quiet. "By the end, she wanted nothing except to take care of her family. She forgot how to play. She forgot how to laugh unless one of us was laughing first." Mom reached for the photograph. "What happened to them?" "They stayed. We all stayed. And we took care of each other until there was nothing left of us as individual people. We became one big hungry thing, feeding on each other's need." "But that's beautiful," Danny said, "being together forever." "Is it?" Uncle Silas pulled out another photograph. This one showed the same family, but they looked different. Thinner, their eyes were hollow and desperate. "This was taken 6 months later. Look at their faces, Danny. Do they look happy to you?" They didn't. They looked hungry. Not for food, but for something deeper. Something that could never be satisfied. "We loved each other to death," Uncle Silas said simply. "Literally, we consumed each other with our care until there was nothing left." "You're trying to scare us," Dad said. "I'm trying to save you, the same way I've tried to save every family that's come here since." "If it's so dangerous, why don't you leave?" Mom asked. Uncle Silas was quiet for a long moment. "Because I'm addicted to it too, to the intensity, to being needed so desperately. Every few years a new family comes here, and I tell myself I'll warn them away. But instead, I stay and watch it happen again." "Because it feels good," I said, understanding suddenly. "Because it feels like the purest love in the world," he agreed, "even when you know it's killing you." We sat in silence, looking at the photographs. I tried to imagine my family looking like that, hollow and desperate and hungry. But even that image didn't scare me as much as the thought of leaving this place and becoming separate people again. "What if we don't want to be saved?" Mom asked quietly. Uncle Silas looked at her with something like relief in his eyes. "Then you don't have to be." "What do you mean?" "I mean there's another choice. There's a way to be together forever. To never have to worry about being apart or becoming individuals. Again." "What way?" Dad asked. Uncle Silas stood up and walked to the pantry. He moved some cans aside and pulled out a hidden package. "The families who came before you," he said, "they chose to stay together, permanently." He unwrapped the package, and inside was meat, but not like any meat I'd seen before. It was dark and strange looking. "What is that?" Mom whispered. "It's what's left of love when love becomes hunger," Uncle Silas said. "It's how families can truly become one." I stared at the meat, and something inside me understood what he was saying. My stomach should have turned. I should have been horrified. Instead, I felt curious and hungry. "If we eat that," I said slowly, "we'll never have to be apart again." "Never," Uncle Silas promised. "You'll be together forever. One family, one body, one hunger." Mom reached for Dad's hand. Dad pulled Danny closer, and I moved toward them all, drawn by the same terrible need that had been growing in us since we arrived. We looked at each other, and I saw the same desperate love in everyone's eyes, the same hunger, the same need to be complete. "We don't have to decide right now," Uncle Silas said gently. "Think about it, but remember, the longer you wait, the hungrier you'll get." He wrapped the meat back up and put it away. But I knew we would all be thinking about it, all day, all night, because the hunger was growing stronger. and we were running out of ways to feed it that didn't involve becoming something else entirely. Something that was no longer human, but was still somehow family. We didn't talk about the meat for the rest of the day, but I could see everyone thinking about it. Dad kept looking toward the pantry. Mom held Danny so tight he squirmed, and I couldn't stop thinking about Uncle Silas's words. Together forever. That night, none of us could sleep apart. We dragged all the blankets and pillows into the main room and made one big bed on the floor. Mom said it was because we needed to stay warm, but we all knew the real reason. We couldn't bear to be separated, not even by walls. I lay there listening to everyone breathe. Dad's breathing was worried and quick. Mom kept making little whimpering sounds in her sleep. Danny whispered, "Mama," over and over, even though she was right next to him. Uncle Silas sat in his chair by the cold fireplace, watching us like a shepherd watching his flock. Around midnight, Danny started crying. "I'm hungry," he whispered. "I'll make you something," Mum said, starting to get up. "No." Danny's voice was strange again, like it had been when he ate the raw meat. "I'm hungry for us. I want us to be together forever and ever." "We are together, sweetheart," Dad said, "but what if we have to leave? What if someone makes us go back to the old house? What if we have to go to school and work and be apart?" The thought made my chest tight. I didn't want to leave either. I didn't want to go back to being just Beth instead of being part of our family. "Nobody's going to make us leave," Mum said. "Promise?" Danny asked. "I promise," she said, but her voice was shaky. "What if you die, Mama? What if Daddy dies? What if Beth dies? Then we can't be together anymore." Danny started crying, harder, and soon we were all crying, because he was right. Even if we stayed here forever, we would still have to face being apart someday. People got old, people died, families got broken up, unless... "Uncle Silas," I said quietly, "the meat you showed us, the families who ate it, are they still together?" "In a way," he said, "they became part of each other, part of this place. They never have to worry about being separated again." "But they're dead," Dad said. "Are they?" Uncle Silas asked. "Or are they just different, more together than they ever were when they were alive?" I thought about the diary entries I'd read, about the families who came before us. In their last words, they all sounded peaceful, happy, complete. "Would it hurt?" Mom asked. "No more than loving each other already hurts," Uncle Silas said. And that was true. Our love did hurt. It hurt to need each other so desperately. It hurt to worry all the time. It hurt to feel like we were slowly disappearing into each other. "We don't have to decide tonight," Dad said. But he kept looking at the pantry. "Actually," Uncle Silas said slowly, "we do." "What do you mean?" "Someone's coming. I saw headlights on the road about an hour ago. Probably a social worker checking on you. They're supposed to visit families who move to remote areas like this." My blood went cold. A stranger, someone from outside our family, someone who might try to separate us. "They can't take us apart," Danny said, grabbing onto Mom's arm. "They can't make us be different people." "They might try," Uncle Silas said, "if they think something's wrong here, if they think the children aren't being cared for properly." But we were being cared for. We were being cared for perfectly, too perfectly. "How long do we have?" Dad asked. "They'll probably arrive in the morning, so you have maybe 6 hours to decide. 6 hours to choose between being torn apart or staying together forever." "I don't want strangers here," Mom said. "I don't want anyone who isn't family." "I don't want to go back to school," I said. "I don't want to be away from you all day." "I don't want to grow up and move away," Danny added. "I want to stay little and stay with you forever." "I don't want to go back to work," Dad said quietly. "I don't want to pretend to care about anything except keeping you safe." We all looked at each other, and I could see the same thought in everyone's eyes. We didn't want to be saved. We wanted to stay exactly as we were. Uncle Silas, Mum said, if we chose to stay together forever, would you stay with us? His eyes filled with tears. I've been waiting 40 years for someone to ask me that. Then we're all in agreement, Dad asked. I should have said no. I should have remembered that I used to want to be a teacher, that I used to have friends, that there was a whole world outside this cabin, but I couldn't remember why any of that had ever mattered. Yes, I said, I want to stay together. Me too, Danny said. Me too, Mum whispered. Dad nodded. Together. Oh, forever. Uncle Silas got up and went to the pantry. He brought back the package and set it on the table. Are you sure? He asked one last time. Once you choose this, there's no going back. We're sure, Mum said. We love each other too much to be apart. Uncle Silas unwrapped the meat. In the lamplight, it looked almost normal, like beef maybe, or venison. This is from the Thompson family, he said quietly. They came here 5 years ago. A mother, father, and little boy. They loved each other just like you do. He cut the meat into small pieces and put them on plates. One piece for each of us. When you eat this, he said, you'll become part of them, and they'll become part of you. All the families who chose to stay together. You'll never be alone again. Mom picked up her piece first. She looked at Dad, and he nodded. For the family, she said, and took a bite. Dad went next. For the family, he repeated. Then Uncle Silas. For all the families. Danny looked scared, but he picked up his piece too. Will it taste bad? It tastes like love, Uncle Silas said gently. Like coming home. Danny bit into it and smiled. It does taste like love. They all looked at me. I was the last one. I picked up my piece of meat, and it felt warm in my hands. I thought about the social worker who was coming, about how they would try to separate us, send us back to our old life where we were just individual people instead of one perfect family. I thought about growing up and moving away, about Mom and Dad getting old and dying, about all of us ending up alone. Then I thought about staying together forever, never having to say goodbye, never having to worry about losing each other. For the family, I said, and ate the meat. It did taste like love, like all the Sunday dinners and bedtime stories and hugs and kisses we'd ever shared. It tasted like safety and comfort and belonging. But it also tasted like something else, something hungry and desperate and sad. We sat around the table holding hands, feeling the meat settle in our stomachs. Outside, the wind picked up, howling around our cabin like it was trying to get in. How long does it take? Mom asked. Not long, Uncle Silas said. Maybe an hour. Will we still be us? You'll be more yourselves than you've ever been. You'll be pure family, pure love. I started to feel strange, not sick exactly, but different, like I was melting around the edges, becoming part of something bigger. Danny giggled. I feel funny, like I'm floating. That's the love, Uncle Silas said. That's the feeling of becoming complete. Dad squeezed Mom's hand tighter. I can feel you, he said wonderingly. I can feel you inside me. I can feel all of you, Mom whispered. We're really together now. I could feel them too. Their thoughts, their love, their hunger. We were becoming one person with 4 bodies, one family with one heart. But then I started to understand what we had really done. The meat wasn't just from the Thompson family. It was the Thompson family. We had eaten them. We had eaten people. And now we were going to become meat too. For the next family who came, here looking for closeness, looking for love. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't, because part of me, the biggest part, was happy. We would never be apart now. We would be together forever, feeding the hunger of the next family who needed us. We arranged ourselves around the table, still holding hands. The poison in the meat was working fast now. I could feel my heart slowing down. "I love you," Mom whispered. "I love you too," Dad said. "I love you all," Danny said sleepily. "I love our family," I said. Uncle Silas smiled at us with tears in his eyes. Such a beautiful family, such perfect love. As my vision got dark, I saw him writing in a journal, probably recording our story for the next family to find. The next family who would come here looking for what we had been looking for. The headlights Uncle Silas had seen weren't from a social worker. They were from another family, a mother, father, and 2 children who had heard about the peaceful logging camp where families could reconnect. They would find us in the morning, sitting peacefully around the table. They would think we looked so happy, so connected. They would want that kind of love for themselves, and Uncle Silas would welcome them in. The cycle would continue. Love would become hunger. Hunger would become consumption, and another family would choose to stay together forever. My last thought before everything went dark was that we had gotten exactly what we wanted. We were together forever, and we were perfect. Bimir Spring, 1964. The Martinez family pulled up to the logging camp on a sunny March morning. There were 4 of them, Miguel and Rosa, and their 2 boys, aged 7 and 10. "Look how peaceful it is," Rosa said, helping her youngest son out of the car. An old man came out to greet them. His name was Silas, and he had kind eyes. "Welcome," he said warmly. "I've been expecting you." Inside the main cabin, there were drawings on the wall, pictures of happy families holding hands. One drawing showed 5 stick figures under a bright yellow sun, with the Happy Hartwells written in a child's handwriting. "Who were the Hartwells?" Miguel asked. "A beautiful family," Silas said. "They loved each other very much. They found exactly what they were looking for here." "We're looking for more family time too," Rosa said. "More closeness. The boys are always at school or with friends. We barely see each other anymore." "Well," Silas said with a gentle smile, "this place has a way of bringing families together, real close." He showed them to their rooms, helped them unpack, made them feel welcome. That night, as they sat around the big wooden table for dinner, the youngest boy looked up at the drawings on the wall. "Where did the Happy Hartwells go?" he asked. Silas's eyes twinkled. "Oh, they're still here, in a way. You might say they became part of the family that runs this place." "That sounds nice," Rosa said, "like they never had to leave." "No," Silas agreed, cutting into the special meat he'd prepared for their first dinner together. "They never had to leave at all." The Martinez family ate their meal and talked about their hopes for their time at the logging camp. They wanted to be closer. They wanted to need each other more. They wanted to be the kind of family that would never let anything tear them apart. And watching them, Uncle Silas smiled, because love, he knew, was always hungry, and there was always room for one more family.